Sound good?
Ready to go?
If anybody's gonna call in, it's on, so it'll get the
We disabled it.
This is it.
disable that.
Yeah, we're done. Here it is.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, welcome everyone. At this time, we need a motion for approval of the agenda.
I'll motion to approve it, even though I'm still trying to find it here. I'm not seeing it.
All right, I second it. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. Okay.
Is that yours? It probably is. I haven't got one.
Thank you. No, you're fine.
Have you had a chance to see the board meeting and the retreat schedule? It's in the, it's in the packet. You want to take a minute and look at it? I thought we just need to.
Let's see, when is the retreat? January.
It is January 26th and 27th. No board meeting in July, no board meeting in December.
That's good to me.
And the retreat looks okay to you too? It's Saturday, Friday and Saturday, like normal. Okay, you wanna, okay, so we don't need any action for that. And I had nominating committee discussion. Our Long County manager in Haywood County stepped down, I guess. And so we'll need to fill that position. So,
And was he filling a particular slot?
we just had large. Is that the only thing that's going to have? Okay.
The secretary.
Yeah, the secretary position, which should probably never be filled. Okay, whenever it freezes over. Okay.
You let me see your list. Over there. For sure.
You remind me in terms of,
There's one other at-large.
One other large.
So we have two at-large and secretary.
are we relatively balanced on the three regions?
I don't, we'll have to work that. Okay, next item, report from our CEO, Brian.
Number one. Oh. Excuse me. Sorry, Gary, I get carried away. When do you want to talk about, I'm just kind of reflecting back here on the retreat thing, do we want to,
Talk about it now. Talk about something.
well,
The proposed schedule is in the packet, so we'll be wanting to vote on that next year, just so we can
Lock it today.
lock in the dates with the hotel, yes.
but as far as the topical nature of the retreat, so hard, things evolve quickly. Like you can plan up to a point, and there's always new features.
Where's the potential?
Well, that's right. Mark's gonna let Tracy off the hook.
I wouldn't say that.
I think that,
Don't you stand up for
Should be in the red.
but Professor Botts, I think some of you probably remember, Mark from various trainings. Brian and I have been spending a little bit of time with him, and he's certainly, we have not checked dates, but he's certainly willing to participate in our retreat. It's been a while since the board has heard from him, so if you'd be interested in that, we can make that happen.
Great.
Sure.
Some of the things we're facing.
Well, I guess we can be mindful of, there's always going to be some amount of turmoil over the state's Medicaid managed care plans and how we are proceeding around that and with whom. And seems certain that some amount of conversation will occur around that, nothing else. Trying to think of the high points. Gee, Cardinal, and Cardinal. Is everyone pretty well up to speed on them?
Right, so, I was gonna say, not since the last meeting, unfortunately.
Let's see, where do we start? There was actually a couple of legislative committee meetings where there was a lot of very strong opposition, anger. I mean, people were very angry. And I actually need to even back up further. There was an audit report, an additional audit that was kind of a follow-up from the other audit. This one focused more on executive compensation and severance. And it was revealed that they were really very generous, let's use that term, severance agreements for, maybe, is it 11, Tracy?
Richard and 10
Yeah.
executives.
So that was like pouring, not gasoline, jet fuel on the fire. So there was a fever pitch. By the time these committee meetings were done, I listened to one of them. Tracy was using her phenomenal typing skills to, she could have had like a blog going, back and forth.
I listened to it the whole day.
Really, I mean, to the point where legislators asking DHHS if they would terminate the contract and break up the catchment area. So, shortly after that, Cardinal had an emergency, I guess, called board meeting, and announced that they had reduced Richard's salary to the state, I guess, the amount that the state had indicated was their limit. And that he had indicated that he would not accept that, and ergo he would be leaving. And then, of course, you have all the issues then of the rest of the executive staff, because it's not only the generosity of those severances, it's also the conditions under which they would be triggered. So for example, if Richard left, they could all have the option to leave and have this severance. So, a lot of the focus now is on how to address that. Are they leaving? If they did leave, would those severances be in place? Who would be a suitable CEO? How much would they pay him? The fact that all these other, top executives all make probably north of, $300,000-400,000. So you got the CEO out of there, and this is one that got kind of glazed over because Richard, he told me himself, and it was reported in the media that he reduced his salary to $400,000 at one point, but then it was at $660 or something in the, and reported again. So I don't know whatever happened with that. Do you, Tracy? Anyway, so, you know, there are still a large number of issues that will have to be resolved.
So
But the goal of him being gone.
So they start pressing together us for other things, I mean, would it be when, I mean, all the way else they can do that? Okay.
So that, you know, has been like a reality TV show unfolding every day. There's another meeting, I guess, beginning of next week, DHHS is going back down. And they're working very quickly to try to resolve things. Just unimaginable for what it must be like for the, I mean, yeah, all the conversation is around the executives and CEO, but for the, you know, 600 staff, I mean, it must be just awful for them to be going through all of this. Well, and of course, that it just changes a lot of things with new leadership there. You know, they have become so much an island that, you know, the plans, insurance plans were not really interested in doing much with them. Really wasn't much of an opportunity for collaboration with the rest of the LME NCOs. So with new leadership, it'll be, it'll really move the needle on a lot of things. Put it that way. Now, other than that, in the middle of this, you have all the hubbub over 403, which remember is that very sort of unwieldy bill with all the salary stuff in it, there's board stuff in it. There's let's go beat up Cardinal stuff in it. And I heard this week that that was in the corner offices, as they say, which would mean that there was an inability of the conference committee to get someplace with it, so that the leaders, you know, were weighing in on that. In fact, I had 2 meetings with senior DHHS staff this week that touched on that, so. How that is changed by Richard leaving and the actions of the board there, what effect that 403 has on us. There was a lot of lobbying going on too around 403. I had a call from both sides that wanted different things to try to educate me about how it would be such a great thing to support, so. You know, a lot of that's really up in the air now. It'll be interesting to see what kind of, what the mood is.
Right.
What the mood is.
And when you say both sides, you're referring to political sides as opposed to houses, right?
And it isn't even, it's more policy, somebody that wants it to be like this, and another group that wants it to be like that. Irrelevant of the, in this case, the houses or
Right.
the R&D stuff. One feature that DHHS was looking for was simply to give the secretary this overarching power to be able to remove a CEO and board. Like if they did something wrong, you know, which, I mean, that's how frustrated people were. You know, and that's one of those swords that
And I
goes
hope you
both
didn't,
ways.
and I hope you didn't agree to that.
No. So,
It's called local law time. As local as 23 counties could be.
So anyway, that's about it.
Well, I guess at this time, we need to go in the closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318, 11A1, in order to prevent the disclosure of competitive healthcare information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 122C, 126.1, are not considered public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of General Statutes, and to consult with attorneys pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318, 11A. Is there a motion, Michael, for that?
So moved.
I'll second it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, question on that retreat. Is it not going to be discussed? About the retreat?
We were just talking about really just the dates at this point. We're going to talk to the board about
Okay.
more details about it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Rogans and Florson. Cow guy.
We were just talking about shoes, Jerry, so. Is there any other, is there our other business? Any other business? No? Michael, is there a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone.
And who's ever going to be speaking, click the button to unmute your microphone on your microphone.
Thank you for calling the Connex to meet now.
Can't we just turn it on green the whole time?
Please enter your passcode followed by the pound or hash key, and I'll connect you.
We need lights here.
Please hold while I confirm your passcode. Thank you. Your passcode is confirmed. If you are the host of this meeting, press the star key now. Or you will hear
I guess Christina saw how good a presentation Jack did of the summary and summing up the meeting for the general board. I'm never quite ready since we just run from one end to the other.
They get the full packet, just like you.
They can read it too, that's right.
Please enter your passcode followed by the pound or hash key, and I'll connect you. Please hold while I confirm your
So we're all
passcode.
three here on those, you guys, kind of. I'm just gonna work and see if we can zeros if they just hadn't turned in some information or something, and run comparisons.
Thank you. Your security code is confirmed. When you return home, you will be the first.
Is everybody here? Should we go and get started 5 minutes early? Or wait? Who else? Jack? Is Jack coming? You know? You know?
He designated you as his proxy.
Okay.
So I'm shot you an email.
Okay, good, thanks.
I was gonna check this after this morning, after yesterday morning. Should we go in and get started then? All right, well, welcome everybody to the Vaya Regulatory Compliance and Quality Committee meeting. Glad y'all are all here and went through the report. I did it on my iPad, so I may have missed a few things I've tried to mark, but it looked good, so. Well, first, I guess we should go around real quick and introduce ourselves. We've got name tags, but it doesn't hurt to refresh our names. I'm Billy Kennedy.
I'm Pat McGinnis.
Brian Shupin, Vaya Health.
Andrea Hartman, Vaya.
Steve Gizicki, Vaya Health.
Patty Wilson, Vaya Health. Allison Inman, Vaya Health.
Marvin Severs, Vaya.
Pam Holcomb Board.
Jeannie Duncan, Jack.
Tracy Hayes, Vaya Health.
Giovanni French, David H.
And Jerry Rice, our photographer.
And 2 secretaries.
Well, thank everybody for coming. I guess we'll go on and get started. I guess I need to approve the minutes, approve the agenda first. Do I have a motion? for it?
I'll make a motion, we approve the agenda.
And I guess I'll second it since.
I'll second it.
All right. All in favor say aye. All right. And approval of the August minutes, did y'all get a chance to read them?
One correction we need on there, I was not able to call in by phone. I was planning on it and life got in the way. So I need an approval of the motion to approve the
I'll
minutes.
make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Motion is second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank y'all. Okay, I guess we start with Marvin with the monthly reports.
Good afternoon. So, we're talking about the TCLI dashboard, and please keep in mind that this is the data for August. Considering the timing of the board meeting, we received September data just yesterday. So we do have the dashboard for yesterday, but I'm prepared for this. This is the August data.
Well, I did like the not yet matured on the last 3 months, because we've asked that and finally got a little, okay, yes, stop asking about that. We'll get the data accurate, once we get to that date.
If you will look at what is slide 3 for you, this is overall how we are doing with transitioning folks into housing. I do need to let you know that during the past couple of weeks, we received a notification from DHHS that our monthly goal for transitioning individuals is not 6, it is 6.58, which affects our annual number. So we will go up from what we're anticipating, 72 to 79.
So can that, that counts, we have to get on another person in to get to get up to that number. And we were like one short, did I see on there?
We were 1 short, but this was prepared when we were still thinking that our numbers were 6.
Okay.
So are we too short now?
Closer to 2, but with the September data, we are actually, I think, 1 ahead.
Okay. Is that one of the things that the penalties will be on next year too?
Yes.
Okay.
That is one of the supervisors.
No, that is one of the things the penalties will not be on, because we are going to meet that measure.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yes, thank you. If we don't meet that measure, there will be a penalty. Thank you.
That is correct. Okay, so slide 3 shows you where we should have been and where we were at the end of August. Slide 4 has 4 different areas in it. You can see the monthly achievements there with our transitioning people into supportive housing. Again, at the time, our target was 6, and for August we did have 7, and which left us with a little bit over 5 for our average. The percentage of individuals transition within 90 days, our target is 80%, and we are at 64% overall. You can see that the days from housing slot issue to transition, we met that in August. We're still running a little bit behind for the year at 98 days, and 90 is the target.
Are we still having a hard time finding places here in Buncombe County to put people in?
It is difficult to find places in Buncombe County that people can afford. It's
Right.
not difficult to find places, but places that people can afford is an issue.
And a lot of our clients want to be in Buncombe County if they can, to have access to more services.
Right. This is where services are, this is where transportation is.
Right.
It's where everybody wants to be. One of the other things that's different from last month, if you look on slide 5, last month we did not have a target for the number of individuals that are at risk of entry into an adult care home. As far as our supported employment goes, we do have a target now, and that is 6 per month. In July and August, we did meet that target. We're looking at slide 6. You see the number of individuals we documented in reach, we continue to do well in, and are at 99%, with the target being 95%. Housing status 90 days after housing slot issued. We're still underperforming there, even though in August we had a very good month. So we're right at the cusp of the target, which is 80%. 80%, and we are at 78%. Those next two areas, there are not targets. So the state is just gathering information on those areas.
Does that just give us some lead time information kind of, or?
Gives us some information, and if you'll look at the number of individuals who agreed to transition, of course, eventually, if we don't get those numbers up, then, and we're still at 5 or 1, then the pipeline's going to dry up. And so we're not going to have individuals that can go into supportive housing. So we do need to, even though there's not a mandated measure by the state, we do need to try to get those numbers up as well. Our quality of life surveys, I think Stephen will talk about this a little bit more during his presentation. There is a QIP for this measure. On average, we are still at about 49%. We put some things in place and we thought we were going a whole lot better. We did get the dashboard for September, and the state's data does not match our data. And so Stephen is actively trying to figure out why our data doesn't match their data and come to reconcile that so that we can accurately reflect what we were doing before we received the dashboard.
And this isn't just the surveys, is it, this quality of life? So the surveys, and we've been having a hard time getting responses forever.
Well, this is the different survey.
Okay.
So we have multiple different surveys. This is the quality of life survey regarding, so for those that transition, you have a pre-survey quality of life survey, and then you have one at 11 months and one at 24 months.
Okay.
Historically, we've had a problem getting them in timely at those intervals, but we put in, like Marvin said, we put in several different things to track that, and our numbers are way off from what the state reported. The state said we were around 50-some%. Based on ours, we're closer to 100%, and we're not quite sure how. Good news is they did send us a data dump on how they calculated it.
Okay.
Which we got, I think, yesterday in our FTP site. So,
So that'll get figured out someday. I'm sure the
Yes.
state will. Sorry, I digress.
we were as shocked as we were shocked.
That it's that, yeah, when it's that big of a difference, there's something going on.
Something's not
Some
right.
kind of calculation or something, okay. Well, I hope we can straighten it out.
So in August, of the defined targets, we met 6, and we fell short in 2 areas. The plan of correction that we had in place last month is still the same plan of correction. Brian and his folks are working actively to make sure that we continue to improve in all areas. And I think next month you will see that September did show significant improvements.
Good.
The rest of the slides are comparing us to the other LME NCOs in the state. It's sort of a mixed bag. You can see that some areas we do a lot better than some of our counterparts, and other areas we don't do quite as well. Unless there are specific questions about any of these.
And I guess all the catchment areas are roughly 1 million, is that true? I mean, are the LME as comparable in size right now?
No, there's kind of a cluster, but there's some that are much larger.
So some of these numbers and percentages could be a little different depending on our size. And their
Depending on the
scale.
size,
Yeah.
if you look at slide 10, for example, this is, every LME NCO has a different goal.
Okay.
So this is the percentage based on their goal. So we're at 92%, or we're in August, and Cardinal, who is significantly larger population than us, they're at 115% of their target. But most of the other, we just have a flat target, so it's 80%, 95%, whatever you want to do, regardless of your size.
If I can add, so Marvin talked about September dashboard, which we have met the target. In October, we're going to meet the target as well, so we already know the numbers and exceed it hopefully. So
Good.
just wanted to share that. We'll wait till it's on the dashboard and comes to this committee, but we're seeing some improvements. We're working hard to improve the business processes. We still see room for improvement on a lot of these other measures that we're addressing.
Well, I know some of the funding we had to cut was some of the legal aid to get some of this housing secured. And I'm just wondering if we're getting a ripple effect from that already. It's just mainly the high cost of housing in that bucket that we're hitting up against now.
Well, I would be in a better position to comment on
Yeah,
that.
yeah, so we've got, quite a few people in transition looking in Buncombe for affordable housing. One thing we found, fiscal legal was great, and helped us with a lot of folks, but with some people's history, we have to really look for private units to be able to accommodate that. But we're working around it. It'd be great to have more support for folks and to be able to help with reasonable accommodations, but we're still in housing.
Thanks.
I have a question. I know we're doing really good compared to some of the places as far as how long it takes to get them housing. The one thing I don't understand is we're doing really bad, it looks like, in enrich contracts that resulted in the decision to transition. Why do you think we're doing so much less when it comes to folks making the decision to transition than other areas?
I've got a guess about that. I don't have anything that I can prove, but we are, so if you'll see that we are in-reaching one of the highest percentages in the state of the people on our list. I think a lot of it's around the folks we're in-reaching at our state hospitals. We put more effort in to do that. We're also in-reaching people incapable to proceed, which are folks that, a lot of those folks can't leave the hospital. So that kind of already puts our numbers down a little bit because we're doing what we're being asked to do around in-reaching those individuals, but they don't have a very high likelihood of being able to transition to the community.
But they're still included in that settlement, that transition to community living.
Yeah, I think some
category.
MCOs have chose to just not in-reach those folks.
And that's really good if you're reaching out to populations that go beyond.
Pat, one other thing, there is a lot of resistance in the provider community and even sometimes with court-appointed guardians. There was actually a situation this week where another LME MCO received a cease and desist letter from one of the alternative family living providers in its catchment area saying, we want you to stop coming to our facility to try to convince them to move to the community.
Is that legal?
I believe there will be a response, and I think that LMEMCO, it was not us, and I think that LMEMCO is working with the department on how to respond to that. But that's the first cease and desist letter that I'm aware of, but it's certainly not the first example of providers being very resistant to the TCLI settlement.
Because the folks that are moving into this were in group homes mostly? Or
Alternative family
alternative
living and
family
adult
living.
care homes.
Yeah, there's been a lot on Facebook in the last week or so about one of these places in McDowell County.
Yes. So there was an article on Health News.
And we're doing more outreach to the public guardians, the DSS directors. I'm just educating them with who qualifies and just helping them be more comfortable with referring. Paid guardians are a little bit more challenging, but we met with the public guardians, the DSS directors, and have offered to come out and do more work individually. So we hope that will happen.
Good. Is that all for your part?
That's it, unless you have any other questions.
I'm good on that. I guess, Stephen, it's up to you now.
It's a lot of pressure. No, I'm just kidding. So this format is the same as it was last year. So I just want to remind you, if you look at slide number 3, I think it's page number 2 in your packet. The items that we found that were kind of constant over the last 6 months or haven't really fluctuated, and we've met the standard if they are set, we kind of add them into this one slide so they're all here, so we will not be discussing those any farther in this presentation. I want to bring your attention to that. Because of that, At chapter 1, there's no new updates because they're all found in that first section. So we'll move right into chapter 2, which is the person served. And I just want to remind you guys that anything that's in those boxes on the end of the graph are claims that are not matured. They will mature, and you will see the data change based on once the claims are more mature. So any questions regarding the person served section? Everything is pretty much on par for the last couple months, or several months, quarters.
Small variations, but kind of what we'd expect.
Exactly. Next up, we go into authorizations. Slide 12, I think it's page 6 in your packet. You'll see that the number of authorizations have dropped kind of in July and August, which we expected due to the changes in authorization requirements. Several services no longer require an authorization, and that's why you're seeing that drop in authorizations.
So the services are still being provided, but they don't have to be authorized?
Correct.
So they're funded but not authorized?
There's several reasons behind that, just making it easier for providers and people to get services.
That some of these basic standards just fall under a basic category or something instead of separate authorizations?
Psychosocial rehab, MST, and Intercept, which are child-based services, our ADVP, group living services, things like those where the authorization requirement was taken away.
And is that a state change?
It's a Vaya.
Vaya change, okay.
But our colleagues across the state, some of them either did it before we did or did it at the same time because of the conversations across the state around authorizations and how do you best direct your resources for things that change very little. Why would you authorize them? So now we just do a post-payment review on the backside to make sure that the dollars are well spent.
It's very similar to what your medical insurance may be. If you need to go to a dermatologist, you don't necessarily have to call the insurance company first and say, hey, can I go to the dermatologist?
That's a great thing. Don't get me started on health insurance.
Sorry.
I'm 60 and I'm getting screwed. Self-insured. Go ahead.
Well, in that case, let's move to complaints and grievances.
That's into place. I forgot the hospital board.
Complaints and grievances, again, their requirement to complete complaints and grievances within 30 days. They've met that mark. That's actually found on that second slide of your packet. The information in this chapter are really in regards to the reports and the comparison among the other MCOs.
And this rates of complaint is really, I mean, it shows how many you've got, but I mean, it's really the settled ones and I mean, a complaint could be valid or not, and then once we review it, we see whether it's.
And we may take action on it, whether we need to, or what it is, depending on what we find.
I have a question.
Sure.
And I don't know, this may not be relevant to this group, but maybe you can answer it. I got a call this week from Chapel Hill, somebody needing some personal hygiene items that's in jail. And so I called the jail and they verified they needed them. So I went and spent $30 and took this bunch of stuff. And one of the other things they were requesting was the contact information for Disability Rights North Carolina, so I printed that off as well. I heard yesterday, even though I called the jail to verify they needed this stuff before I went out and spent $30, and that I could bring it up there and drop it off for them. I heard yesterday that I reckon they'd never been told it's there, or that the Disability Rights address where they could write them a letter is there. And the other thing is, I took a one day at a time book. I picked up some of these at Commerce last year to hand out. Now, it's strange to me, and this is a mental health client, but also has physical health client, a lot of physical health problems. It's strange to me there's something I feel like probably the jail ought to be spending their money on instead of me spending my money on. I could take up there and drop off. Whether they ever get it or not, I don't know. And the other thing is the one thing that might have helped with their mental health, I was told, oh, they can't have this one day at a time book. Brand new book. Are we doing anything with the jails? Do they not have the right for those phone numbers and the address to write disability rights if they're having a problem? Or complain to somebody if they're a mental health client and they're not getting what they need?
Was it a county or state jail?
It's McDowell County Jail. And the last thing I want to do is be on anybody's list as far as jails, because believe me, I've been on the list before, and I don't want to be on a list and bashing the jails. I don't want stopped and tickets, and I don't want incarcerated myself. But is there anything we can do to help out in these situations?
Well, I know one of the subjects that came up and later in the report is that people are being let out of jail and we're not able to get in touch with them. Wasn't that a?
There are some limitations on what we can do in the incarcerated setting. So Medicaid, the IMD exclusion, and other exclusions do not allow us to provide services paid for by Medicaid in an incarcerated setting. So the only jail outreach that we have is with our non-Medicaid funds, our state dollars, which, as you know, are much more limited than our Medicaid dollars. We certainly, Pat, I will tell you that all of our, if we send notices, and, for example, to a member denying a service request, it does include disability rights contact information as well as legal aid in North Carolina. So we certainly provide that information. We include that information in our member handbook. I can't speak to what county jails and state facilities have in their areas, but we certainly include that information. And our call center staff are certainly trained to provide people with linkage to disability rights and legal aid if they need that.
So do you think that book was federally funded, or is it our book that you were trying to get one day at a time? Is that a state?
I went to the Pinehurst conference last year, and there was a table handing these out. It's part of the AA program.
Well, I'm just curious as to that falling into that
And it was
federal
a provider
restriction.
that had them and said, if you know somebody, and I picked up a handful of them, and I thought, well, this might help make jail time a little easier. You should focus on the positive. And I was really shocked for one thing, and I'm talking about somebody that has incontinence issues, that needed some incontinence supplies. Should those things not be provided by the jail? I mean, it just struck me as real funny. I could go out and buy those kind of things because it saved the jail money.
I know at our county jail, there's some things are provided, some are allowed in, some things are charged for. And I have issues with charging prisoners for things, but it's kind of the way it is, I understand. So I don't know, we'll have to refer that back to the Department of Corrections,
is because this person's health problems, they're in, I guess you would call it segregation, which means they don't have contact, the same opportunities to use the phone and to contact the outside world. So my contact came from somebody else that had been in contact with them, but because they've got health problems, they're in segregation, but they're kind of being penalized because they're in segregation. They're being treated like they broke the rules when it comes to privileges.
Is there any chance, Yvonne, that we could get some direction from the Department of Corrections or something on?
See, the Department of Corrections is not over our county jails.
Well, it's the county jail, but they still, I don't know if the prisons, I don't know how that goes.
So it's totally separate.
I know it's all funded by the county, and I don't know that would be, that we could address that here, except that it's true that about half our inmates in Watauga County have mental health issues. So to separate the prison population from the mental health providers seems to be a gap.
I mean, this person has not only mental health issues, but physical health issues. They have both, and they're complex.
Well, and every jail has a health plan as well that's approved. I know that Dr. Martin sees some of those, but I don't know that every county includes in those plans.
But maybe, I don't know if we could do some kind of, just reach out to our different counties in our catchment area and say we're concerned about the mental health population. We just want to, I know we can't add more to our plate because we're about tapped out, but I'm just wondering if we
I'm a little
could.
hesitant to make you a promise. But I will certainly, is certainly some feedback that we can take back to our provider network department and work with some of our providers that are in the jail setting to see
Oh, that'd be good.
what
Okay.
else we can do.
Appreciate that.
Alright. Next, we'll move into the claims portion, and sorry, Dr. Khan's not here, but he asked me a question specifically last time about clean claims and how much of, what percentage are we receiving that are clean claims and which are not. The problem is it's only considered, it's a clean claim when we accept it. If we don't accept it, it's automatically rejected in our system, so we're not even touching it. Or did you ask me?
I think it was probably Jack. I missed the last meeting, but Jack may have asked that.
You were looking at me, and I was like, wait, hang on a second.
I was trying to remember whether I did.
So it was, we don't ever see those claims, so we don't ever touch them, so they don't even enter our system, so
Okay.
we're not, and I think his fear was that we were spending a lot of time working these unclean claims that are in our system. And we actually never even see them, we don't even know that they come in, they're rejected on the front end, so.
So we don't probably need that. If Jack, when Jack's here next week, he might think about it.
I'll tell him.
I think I wasn't able to do last week.
Okay, so that was the update on the claims portion. Was there any questions about the claims?
Seems to be staying about in that range.
Yep.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. Can
What's
you
that?
explain that? I mean,
Which part?
you said
The clean
that
claims part.
if a claim doesn't go through your system, then you don't know anything on
So if and I probably said that incorrectly, so,
it. You know about every claim you get sent.
that we receive and accept it. If it's like, if the claim is sent to us that doesn't have like a member ID, or it doesn't have a name, or it doesn't have a birthday.
Well, you're
or-
still going to deny it for
It didn't-
those, for something like that.
It denies it on the back, on the front end that we don't see. So it says, it can't, it doesn't even accept it. It doesn't, it's rejected. The claim itself is rejected. So we won't know that we have it. So
Is
rejected
that
to
just for
provide.
lack of information, pertinent information?
Usually.
I think it's just a question of wording, because, and you do know you have those claims, because then they have to be re-adjudicated, and you have to, there's a time frame for all of that, and so you gotta know you got the claim for us to be able to adjudicate it in a timely manner, so.
So what happens is once that's submitted and it's not considered a clean claim, it's rejected, it notifies the provider, hey, this claim was not accepted and it was rejected. And so it's notified that way as just a, hey, here it is, but we don't have reports and we don't see what it was. It says it was rejected.
And then do they resubmit them sometimes?
And then it's with the providers.
Most of the
to
time.
Sometimes it's just a clerical, something that needs to be
yes.
cleaned up before you can put it in the
And it's
system.
usually like an extra letter was, or an extra number was in the ID or in the Medicaid ID or something like that. So it rejects it from the front end. So it doesn't ever get to us.
And there's a group that are rejected on the front end, and then there's the group that are and I'm thinking this may be the group you're referring to, Jeannie, the group that make it through that front end edit, but there's still pieces that have to be looked at for re-adjudication.
And so then those are worked in denials with the.
But even if, and I don't want to take a lot of time here, because even if we send a claim to you that's missing, or a Medicaid number is missing a digit or whatever, we're still going to get a response back that says, and so then we can fix that and send it back to you.
Right.
So it's, I just don't understand what you mean by you don't have it in your system, because it's got to be in your system somewhere for you
I
to be
guess they
able
were
to-
saying they're having a hard time categorizing those because they're not.
They're denials,
Once you
is
read-
what they are, so.
It's a different level of denial, from what I understand. Now, I'm not in claims by any means.
Trust me, I know a lot about claims.
Hold on. And my understanding was that it blocks it at the front. I can go back, I'll get more definition.
It's not worth spending the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's an auto response, but we should know how many of those get kicked.
But, I mean, some of those could come in 3 times, if they put the wrong information, it comes back, it goes back, it comes back, and then, so each one, do you count that as one rejection, or is that 3 times to get it right?
Probably 3.
I'll go back and get more clarification on the wording, and I might be using the incorrect wording, but you've got me more curious than anything, so I'll figure it out. Next up is the community hospitalization. And I also want to make sure that you look at the kind of chart at the bottom that shows the original submission as well as when that is matured, and then you have the prior years. So make sure we take a look at that when we're discussing these numbers, because you will see that they fluctuate quite a bit with some of the measures. Any questions about community hospitalization?
It just, like I say, I think it's because the numbers are so low that it seems to jump up and down so much. I mean,
Especially with substance use.
and those, it's hard to even get an average on those, it looks like.
But I will say we have lots of initiatives to work with that population, because those services are, there are high needs individuals, so. All right. Next up, we have the update on the super measures. If you recall, there's 6 of those, 4 of which regarding follow-up after discharge.
Did you go over the ED stuff?
Oh, did I miss ED?
Yeah, sure.
Readmissions.
I'm sorry about that.
Or I skipped it.
Oh, I did, I apologize. So this is a 3-month lag on the ED reports, make sure you keep that in mind. So this is looking at really May data.
So we were going down, but we'll just have to wait a few months to see how it's going now.
Correct. There was a note that in years past that it seems that there's a spike here towards the end of the school year when kids are out of school. Historically, there's always a spike in ED visits towards that end of school year. Not saying that they're completely related or there's more kids around, there's more ED visits. I'm not saying that, but that is a trend that we saw over the past couple of years. As kids are let out of school, our number of ED visits seem to increase.
And does this include children in this? So yeah, that was one of the things we've reviewed before, that during the summer they don't seem to have access to services as much. And it could be because of the services provided while they're in school, a lot of them.
At times.
I think so. That might be a.
They have the whole summer vacation things and lots, so the access might be more limited. When the children's in school, you know where they are.
And the rural part plays in again too, with both parents working, harder to get. Okay.
Any other questions with ED before we move into super measures? All right. So as you recall, there's the 6 different super measures, the TCLI, which we already discussed, the innovations, then you have follow-up after discharge.
So this is starting now, but you don't know till 6 months later whether you've been penalized or not?
So actually, we won't know. The performance reporting period is for January 2018. We will not see the state report until July of 2018. We're building things in place now to go ahead and kind of predict where we might be and put in things to ensure that we are meeting that benchmark when we do start getting the reporting period in January.
And I guess we'll be able to look at our data along the way too, and do corrective actions and see how they work.
That is the goal.
We're also working with the PAC and providers there to help, put some goals in place to help meet some of these things as well. And there's just some systemic issues that, that are kind of obstacles to meeting this. One of them being like if somebody's in an FBC or something like that, then, and we're not the provider, but we discharge them, then how, you try to link that up, or how do you know somebody's been in the hospital, and there's just a lot of systemic issues, so we're trying to work through that in our subcommittee groups on the PAC as well.
Because those people are in different provider files, different places.
That's right.
And then they're in different catchment areas at the same time, depending on when they end up getting treatment. And then all that's got to be tracked back to who's going to pay.
Well, and then there's some services that you may give them that aren't a billable service, and so how does Vaya get credit for that as well, so,
And it's all claims based.
because it's all claims based.
And so if we, one of the other issues is claim based, so we won't know about it until way past the time. So we're looking at strategies to get real time, or as close to real time data as we can. So we know and can identify these individuals that are in these placements.
And how much, what percentage are out of catchment area that we have claims? I mean, I guess
I have to
depends
look
on
at
when
that.
they came in the system and whether they're still in our system or not, or.
And another piece of it is if we have a member in our catchment that we're paying for, but is receiving a service outside of our catchment, and they go to the hospital, or we're still responsible for them, even if they're in the hospital in Wilmington or something like that.
Same thing with people from Trillium that are here.
Right.
Okay. It's just trying to track it down after that.
It's not.
Well, we
easy-
um, want those services to be available wherever you
Right.
are. So
Exactly.
that makes sense, but it's a little logistical issue.
So we just got our last data dump from the state on Friday that we're combing through and hopefully getting a lot of those questions. Where are they? What happened? What was the process? There's stuff on the other side too, not only the clinical side of it, but on our claim side, and how did the claims go through? Were they approved through us? Were they approved through NC Tracks? So there's the clinical side of it, and then there's the business side of it that we gotta work through and get them matched together to get the full picture of this. The other super measures regarding the innovations preventive care visits. We've done some analysis on this. For the month of July, we see that we were at 89.6% with the standard being 90%. So we're really close to that. We've got there's a team working on this measure as well as all the other measures. But this one in TCLI, we're pretty confident with the work that we have done that we're going to be meeting these measures. The fallback for discharge, as we talked about, is a lot more complicated. It involves several different groups. It's definitely going to take a community effort to get this one done. So, any questions about the super
The
measures?
other, I didn't see it, the other LME is in that same range too? On that?
We don't have the data.
That was
on-
not comparison data on that one, okay, all right.
No, not on that measure.
So that's but they will start having it since it's a super measure.
We will.
So next year, we'll be looking at that data probably and taking some more money. Where are we at now?
I think we're ready to jump into the compliance log.
We are.
I think Andrea's going to take over that one.
So for the CDW episode completion records, I'm happy to announce that we have met the standard for the second quarter. So if we meet it again, then we will get to drop this one off of our compliance log.
And that's the issue with the, our software, wasn't it?
Well, we have, but we've made our own internal adjustments because we still don't have a projected date of when they'll complete that in alpha.
That was the alpha system, wasn't it? Okay.
That
And
is.
we've been trying to get that one right for a while, haven't we?
We have, so we just made our own internal adjustments on how we process them, and that seems to be working.
Good, good.
For the incident submitted timely, technically, I just got the update, so it's not on this report, but we actually have met for the next quarter for our incident submitted timely. This doesn't reflect that, but the next report that comes out will. And so for the, we just have some updates on some of the things we've been doing in regards to reviews. We submitted our EQR corrective action plan for partially met and not met items to CCME on October 11th. We're currently waiting for feedback on that. We also have a what is it, the root cause analysis for our systems review. Then you can see that on the next slide. And then for system of care documentation, we have submitted a state plan or a work plan for them. They gave us some edits, and then I believe we sent that back, and so we're waiting on additional feedback on work group.
Wasn't there a system of care in place years ago and kind of got forgotten? I know it might.
We've always had it, and so it's always been functioning. It's just kind of shifted on where it lives.
Okay.
Right now, we're also preparing for our 2018 URAC reaccreditation. And there's in the report that Tracy will give, there's a timeline on those dates. And the only kind of negative we had on one of our reports was we were delayed on the annual traumatic brain injury submission, and that was due more to the reorganization. The person that used to manage that was part of that reorg transition, and so, but we caught it.
Good.
And then the next few slides, you have the root cause analysis would be the next one, and then the slides following that are our results. I wanted to provide all of them for each section for our EQR. We're pretty proud of it this go around, so we made improvements in all areas.
That's something I should report to the whole
Yes.
Usually we give bad news, so I'm happy to report good news.
And it is a lot of work for the team, so Andrea is downplaying that, but I would just say that she and a couple other folks are here very late at night to get us ready for our EQR and to submit all of the paperwork and just to deal with all of the specific, the bureaucracy around that. It's pretty formidable.
And is that an annual?
That is an annual review.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Successes.
Who's doing success?
Oh, successes and achievements. You can see we have included a slide for that at the very end. We tried to do that, just to give you a sense of, there is a lot of good news happening at Vaya. And we don't want to lose sight of that in giving you sort of all the data and the compliance issues. So obviously we met the TCLI housing standard for the months of August and September, which is phenomenal. And Brian Shuping deserves a lot of credit for that, helping to turn that team around. We successfully launched our Vaya Total Care Coordination Platform across all 23 counties. This started as a pilot in McDowell County, and it is now being spread across all 23 counties. We introduced a new internal newsletter for our employees, Connections, which has been very well received. One of the pieces of feedback we had received as a leadership team was that we needed to improve our internal communication, so we have been really working on that. We hired a new staff person, Nick Meacham, who comes from England and who has been, I think, a really great addition to the team. And so we have this nice newsletter for staff internally.
And when does that go out?
It goes out theoretically every Tuesday. This week it's a little late, and that's my fault. But, yes, it goes out every Tuesday, and we could add board members to it.
I was thinking that might be
That would be
nice
good.
to see. The more we know about the organization, the better we can serve the board.
We absolutely can do that. I say that. I'm looking at Allison like, oh yeah, sure. She's like,
You got all our
Great.
emails, and you put it out,
Sure,
it goes out on email anyhow?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really the primary goal for the newsletter is to really, it's in the title of the newsletter, is to connect employees across departments and across offices to really help boost morale within the organization and help us all connect to one another as an organization as a whole. So
Connect us too.
we would absolutely love that. And we do have a section within actually the most popular section of the newsletter is the 20 questions. We pick a staff person each week to and they're asked 20 questions, random questions about themselves. So We may be calling on board members to
That
answer
sounds
those
great,
questionnaires
yeah.
as well at this point, so.
Heard you sign up for public stuff, you can't hide anymore.
And then the last one was that we had 4 staff who successfully completed the NCIT training basic course and passed the certification exam, and that includes Andrea, Heather Boyd, Lori Jorgensen, and Rodney Willis on Patty's team, so.
And is that the kind of stuff that would be in that newsletter too?
It already was in the newsletter. It includes, we're trying to focus on successes. We've had some staff who have had some lovely additions to their family, and when they came back to work, we announced that. It's got birthdays. It's a nice cheery newsletter.
Sounds great. I enjoy reading it occasionally, so don't wait a minute to respond.
You know, I'm so glad y'all are doing that. I talked to somebody that was talking about the folks that work for Richard Toppin's team and folks in that area, and a friend of mine said she was told they go in, they do their job, they just hang their heads, and they don't talk to anybody. They just can't wait till the end of the day so they can go home. There have been some really ugly things down there, so I'm so glad that y'all are reaching out and trying to build morale, because it's extremely important.
Well, thank you, Pat. I will say it's been a particular focus of mine, and it's really, it's kind of selfish. My job is all about bad news. Nobody comes to tell me great things unless I go out and look for it, and so I can get a little depressed if I don't reach out into the organization and say, hey, tell me what are the good things that are happening, because nobody, if it's great, they don't need to talk to me. They only need to talk to me if it's bad, so it's been a nice thing.
And you know, it's a great team doing really important work, and so for y'all to feel good about coming in is just as important as all the work out there too. So I think that's great.
All right, now we're about to see if this works. It's very exciting. It is working. You have this in your packet, but I'm just going to take you through it really quickly. This is a fairly long report. I am not going to touch on every single slide, but this is your quarterly compliance report. It goes a little beyond compliance. It's got metrics about all of our contracts. You can see sort of our totals for the year in comparisons to previous years.
And this is a different way we've done it, with each color being a different year.
Yes.
So this is the first time I've seen this chart,
Yes.
and it's good. I just had to get my head around it.
Yep. So you can see kind of by month our contracts. We categorize them in terms of administrative versus Medicaid only. We have providers who only receive Medicaid funds. Our providers who receive both Medicaid and non-Medicaid funds. Our providers that are non-Medicaid only, which is the smallest section. We have very few providers that only receive non-Medicaid funds. Innovations agreements, and these are things like a home modification, a vehicle adaptation, also includes our TBI funding. So these are kind of unusual types these are very individualized and specific.
And those are all during the year, whereas the others,
The others are
mainly June and July, because
yeah.
we're trying to do a July.
Exactly, yeah. Out-of-network agreements, this does not include hospitals, but you can see where we are slowly decreasing those over time, which is our goal. We should be able to provide all the services that are necessary from providers within our network. Hospital out-of-networks is still fairly high, although we've been able to bring some of those down. We have less leverage with hospitals we can't force them to join our network, and we need them maybe a little more than they need us. And so we work really hard. We have finalized contracts with Carolinas, which was probably responsible for that drop of 308 to 208. But we are still working on trying to finalize a contract with Novant and UNC. But we do have contracts with all the major hospital health systems in our catchment area. This is more about hospitals outside of our catchment area.
Didn't you and Carolinas just merge?
They have announced they have a website called movingforwardtogether.org. I would not call it a merger. They describe it as a partnership. And it will not take effect for at least a year.
Weren't those the two largest providers in the state for hospital? And then I'm on the hospital board in Watauga County, and there's a lot of this going on with the hospitals joining different networks and being some consolidation going on there, I guess.
Yes.
And we're just part of that.
Yes, absolutely. You can see our annual contract totals, at 1,214 last year, and year-to-date is 734. So our contracts team is kept very busy. This is some incident response team metrics. This is Patty's team and one of Patty's 4 teams. And this is data from a rolling year starting October through September 2017. So you can see a comparison of level 2 and level 3 incidents. It stays pretty stable over time. In particular, the level 3 almost doesn't move at all. We thought this was interesting, and we'll put together this data around the top 10 services with the highest number of incidents. You can see that's PRTF, child and adolescent day treatment, are the 2 biggest. PRTF far and away the biggest, which is as to be expected.
And that was level 1, 2, and 3?
This is 2 and 3 only.
Only 2 and 3, okay.
We do not
Patient
receive the.
management, that's kind of a surprise.
Say that again?
Medication management.
For me, it's not a surprise because.
Is that like just dosages and things like that, or what?
It is primarily the incidents that we see on those medication management incident response is a misdocumentation record, so that had to be reported. Some missed dosages in residential settings. For me, that was really not that surprising. It has not raised an alarm with Dr. Martin. We asked him about that because it is in the top 10. And when he looked at the incident reports coming through, he was not
But
concerned.
couldn't some of those like if you look at the things, your examples you're given, I would see those spread out through all of those things. Like you may have a medication error and cause an incident report to be done in a PRTF.
I don't disagree, but the provider chooses the category that the incident response is calculated in, and we go with that unless it's a glaring error, in which case the incident response team calls the provider and says, "Are you sure this is which box you meant to tick?"
Interesting.
Okay. Submitted incidents by category. We tried to kind of streamline this presentation for you, and so you have a second document in here, which is the quarterly compliance report definitions. And so that way we didn't have to include all those definitions in the slide, but if you need to refer to them, you've got them. So the definitions of those different types of categories are there. That problematic behavior was the biggest for level 2, and death is the largest for the level 3s. And death does not necessarily mean, it includes death by natural causes. And in fact, the way the process works, probably one of the longest things we wait for is the ME report, so we can close out an incident to say, it was a death by natural causes, and we can close this out.
And are all people on Kashmir, do they have the autopsies if they're, or do they just do a medical report?
It depends. We sometimes get the full autopsy report.
But sometimes they don't even do an autopsy.
Correct. But you still have to have that medical examiner sign up.
Okay. And so usually people cause it there if you do an autopsy report, okay.
Yep. So there's some statistics on our critical incident review committee. Is made up of clinicians. Dr. Martin chairs that committee, and Patty is on that as well. And so you can see 11.3 incidents received were level 3 or deaths, which were reviewed. So some of the CPU metrics in terms of referrals, we're averaging about 17.2 investigation referrals a month. Investigation types range between complaint investigations, which have a 30-day time frame, SIU referrals, which are fraud, waste, and abuse referrals, focused provider monitoring, which has a 60-day time frame, health and safety, etc. So those are some of the categories and types. And here's some data. We've got some data in here around the routine monitoring, which is going away, but the routine post-payment review continues. So I'm not sure providers will necessarily see much of a difference, but it basically means we're using a different tool than we were using in the past. But all of this is DHHS mandated.
Same time frame and everything.
Yes. Once every 2 years. Then we got some data around the plans of correction that have been required versus not required. It's really about 50-50 overall when you look across the chart. And a comparison of complaint investigations versus focused monitoring. Complaint investigation, we're really talking about a complaint that has come in on behalf of a member or family, And a focused monitoring may be the result of concern expressed by an internal Vaya staff member, or some trends that have been identified through the IOC have led us to believe we need to conduct a focused monitoring.
And then that's usually 60 days?
That's a 60-day time frame, yeah. Investigations by provider type, agency and residential are generally the highest, and that's pretty standard across all the months.
Well, they'd have a lot more hours in the day, wouldn't they?
Yes, yes, they do. And in terms of investigation plan and corrections, again, roughly about 50-50. The NC top slide, we're particularly proud of that. This was a very big issue for Vaya in early days of waiver operation, where we were very much not meeting the NC TOPS requirements. But since June 2015, after we have completed that QIP, we've maintained the state performance standard of 90% consistently, and we are currently at 98.3% rate. And the thing that is so impressive about this is a measure, it's not something that we do, it is something that our providers do. So this was about the team working with providers to bring up that percentage. And so the contract performance unit under Lisa Bessie's and Patty really deserves a lot of credit for that. SIU metrics, this is our fraud, waste, and abuse. You can see some of those statistics in terms of case status by quarter, investigation dispositions by quarter. Overpayment notices were sent out in the last 12 months totaling $700,000. Following reconsideration reviews, those have been revised down to $671,000, so they are very much largely being upheld.
I think that's one of the most important things in the SIU data this time is that over a period of time working through the reconsideration process and working with our legal department, that SIU team has gotten better at what they call out so that so much of it isn't being overturned at the point of reconsideration. And that has been a real process of collaboration with Tracy and with Amy Modi, our other attorney, to get really clear about service definition says this is the reality, and this is what will and will not hold up. So it's been a great improvement.
I like to focus on black and white. We spend a lot of time, if we go into the gray areas, focusing on things that may or may not be upheld. If I have to spend more than 30 minutes trying to understand it, then probably it's not going to be upheld. So we really try to focus on black and white.
And you think we'll get that $500,000 back?
Out of that amount, I can tell you that a little over $300,000 is the subject of a 2-year payment plan from one of our providers, and they are making payments. So we will see if they can continue to keep that up over the 24 months is the maximum payment plan allowed under state law. So.
And that has also improved our collection on these overpayments as Tracy has worked with our finance to be more diligent in that process.
So health records.
So just next year, these things are tightened up and the rules are clear, so maybe we won't have this much to get back next year.
We'll
Hard
see.
to say.
It's hard to say. Yeah.
But this is
Wish I could tell you that.
a step in the right direction.
It is, absolutely. Health records. You like that picture? We receive a lot of releases of information to process every fiscal year, and most of these are medical record requests signed off on by the member or family. We get subpoenas and court orders directing us to hand over records, and we also receive public records requests. And then concealed carry handgun permits.
I want to get back to this stored stuff at Iron Mountain.
Okay, we'll get there.
Oh, we're not there, that's later,
Yeah.
okay. All
So
right.
concealed carry handgun permits, that one is interesting to me. I like to point this out because we get, I'm sorry, Vaughn, can you close your ears here, but we get 0 state dollars to perform this function, 0. It is a lot of work. You can see over time how we've gone from 7,000 requests to 9,500 requests in FY16, and last year 11,000 requests. And we're on track to meet or exceed that this year. And so again, the way that works is the counties in the pie chart on the right send us requests to check our records to see if any applicants for concealed carry have mental health history that would disqualify them. We do not make the determination, we just simply provide the records to the sheriff's office. But only 2% of the applicants we check have records. Records retention, yep, our Iron Mountain storage is going way down, so we're excited about that. We started off with, in 2014, after the merger with Western Highlands, over 5,000 boxes in Iron Mountain. We are down to 319 boxes. We're on either scanning or shredding, as we are permitted to do under our record retention schedule.
So, New River,
New River is maintained by Watauga County.
I know, and we're gonna have to, somebody's gonna have to go through that, because it's not, doesn't all need to be saved.
That is correct.
And,
I'm happy to have an offline conversation with you about that.
okay, very well.
Okay. Regulatory compliance, this is Andrea and Marvin's shop. We're working diligently to get our policies down. That continues. We feel pretty good about the progress we've made. You can see we got about 170 published policies in Policy Tech right now. And certainly the time it is taking to get them approved has shortened dramatically. It's gone from 94 to 39 there. And but we still have a lot of policies in draft, so that's going to be our next focus. Privacy and security. You can see some of the reported internal incidents over the rolling year. There were 120 total incidents, 63% self-reported, and only one remains open. And we are continuing, I think, to do a really good job with our privacy and security efforts.
Because you've, in the last year or two, we've done the, with the phones, that y'all done a encrypting thing with the phones and with the computers, so this is a step y'all took in the last year or two to address this issue.
Yep, and we are continuing to work with Clearwater Compliance, the vendor that came and did the presentation. They help us with our HIPAA risk analysis every year, so we feel pretty confident. But the hacking attacks continue, so that is something that is definitely still a risk. Next slide is external incidents, 51 during the time frame. Ethics point reports have totaled 131 since we went live with Ethics Point. The vast majority of those are complaints or grievances, which are processed through our grievance team. Out of those reports, 103 are closed and 28 remain open.
And this data would show up that we just, in the
Yes.
data we just looked at, okay.
We've conducted 4 internal investigations and issued 4 plans of correction so far this year. This is just our ongoing quality, continuous quality improvement effort. In our compliance meeting the other day, one of our staff made the excellent point that we do this because we want to find the problem before EQR comes on site and finds the problem. So this has been working very well. The annual compliance work plan was approved by this board in our June compliance plan, and so the audit plan includes grievances, credentialing, contracts, UM, and innovations. And the grievance audit is scheduled for the first week of November. We got some data around the volume of communications. Basically this is just Marvin and Yvonne. No, it's really not. It's Marvin, Yvonne, and a whole lot of other people.
Every email they send back
Emailing
and
each
forth.
other furiously. But we are trying to keep track of the volume just so we can kind of demonstrate, our responsiveness to the state and just the volume of requests that we receive.
No, I thought that was good FYI information.
And then external audit status, you should just be aware that our next URAC reaccreditation is this year. We're in that cycle. The desk review will be in March of 2018. That's slide 52. In terms of appeals, we've had 3 administrative reconsiderations. These are around shadow claims. We've had 8 sanction reconsiderations. 5 were upheld, 2 withdrawn, and 1 was lifted because we got more information before the reconsideration began. Claims denial reconsiderations, we've received 354 in that time frame, 61% upheld. We're working with the claims team on the ones that are being overturned to try and address those areas. And then litigation, we've had 28 member appeals that were settled, 9 withdrawn, 4 remain open, 2 upheld, and 1 dismissed. And we've had 1 provider appeal and 2 other cases. And then the last slide has a member appeals duration, just kind of shows you, I had mentioned
think earlier that resource allocation is one of the issues we're really spending a lot of time on, and you can see all those blue cases are resource allocation cases. So, I want to make sure I give enough time to Allison, so do you have any questions? Anybody have any questions?
Very good.
And Allison, I'm gonna, there it is. I can even take you through this if you wanna. Good. I want to introduce Allison Inman. For those of you who have not met Allison, she is our Senior Marketing Communications Director, and really doing a lot of great work. And I thought y'all would be interested in some of these metrics, give you some data on our outreach and education.
Thank you, Tracy, for having me. We can go through this all pretty quickly. Tracy had asked our team, the marketing and communications team, to pull together some statistics over the past year of some of the outreach efforts that we've been doing. So we can dive right in. This is just kind of a quote that we try to keep in the back of our minds as we're doing our work, that the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So we can dive right into the news releases. So what we did is we pulled data all the way back from over the past 4 years, so from 2014 to year-to-date this year. You'll see there's been a significant jump over the past 2 years. We have really tried to focus our efforts heavily on media outreach and really target those news releases to our specific communities. We found that gets a much higher response from our different community newspapers than just a blanket press release that goes out about a big Vaya initiative.
So are these newspapers, actual newspapers, this number of news releases, or is this online releases?
No, these are newspapers as well, yeah, in print and online.
And are you?
This is not the number of articles, these are just the number of releases we've issued.
Okay, and are you getting these releases published in some of the smaller papers?
Yes, we've got a slide on that, just so you want to see.
Yeah. Those numbers are
I did look
higher.
through it.
So you'll see, so just to give a distinction between a press release and a media advisory. Media advisories we typically just send out in advance of events. Specifically for us this year, we've sent out quite a few media advisories around our Mind Care kiosks that we've been unveiling in the different communities. So that's why you'll see the spike there. In 2016, we didn't have as many events, so that's why that number is a little bit different. But this is what you'll see, the news articles. So these are the ones, what you see here is a combination between press releases that have been picked up, or articles or features that we have pitched to different media outlets and they've decided to pick them up and run articles, or they've actually reached out to us as a resource for information to provide either a quote or an interview. You'll see that we've actually really picked up our numbers with TV. So in 2014, our presence on TV was pretty non-existent. So we've really increased that over the past 3 years. And we're really proud because we've turned this corner as an organization that we are now sought out by the local media within our catchment area as a really valued expert resource around the different disabilities. So,
And I don't see any of the northern counties here. Ash, Allegheny, Watauga, Avery. So, and those were all owned by the same newspaper company. Maybe you can reach out. They're not going to listen to me. So
I will tell you that the northern counties are a challenge. We have had some good experience specifically with partnering with providers within that area to get some media coverage. So that's definitely something that we'll continue to look at as we roll more efforts out throughout the year.
And are we doing anything through Appalachian State University or West Carolina?
We have done some outreach with them. We haven't really heavily focused on that, but we have done, I know we have in months past, we've done some things,
So a
yeah.
lot of this is the Narcan stuff and the
Yes.
other presentations and
Yeah.
the event we had here 2 months ago. and stuff.
Right. Yeah, you'll see, I mean, you can see that, as far as the news articles, the topics that are being covered, it's very much in keeping with what is, what's happening within the communities at large.
Well, I know that the opioid epidemic is huge, but surely to God, we can do better when it comes to mental health and IDD than the numbers. I mean, we're supposed to represent all three, and looking at that, it don't look like we're doing a good job of spreading it out. When you look at IDD numbers and you look at mental health, that's pitiful.
I think one of the things that we certainly are sending out information on an equal basis, but this is about what,
Or do they print it or not?
what do they pick up? And of course, opioid epidemic is gonna be something that they're much more interested in right now. So.
Yeah, we are certainly, I mean, we don't have a laser focus on any one disability or any one area of need. We're equal opportunity in what we're sending out to the different communities, but like Tracy was saying, it's really a matter of what the hot button issues are. And a lot of the, a lot of the communities right now are so heavily focused on that. So what we try to do within those efforts is when we do get approached about those types of stories, we try to include information about the other areas that we offer support. So there's certainly always a good faith effort on our part to try to make sure that we're communicating effectively all the different areas that we offer citizens.
And if somebody reads it, mental health, it's still, I think we're still in the process of getting substance use accepted as a mental health issue. So any of that, you can tie that together and realize that these are all part of the big disease.
Absolutely.
And how we can fix it. So,
yeah.
and like I say, once you get and I'll mention, I might take this to my local paper and say, well, what's going on here? All these other counties are picking up on stuff and you're not, so.
Well, we appreciate that.
Think that'll work, Brian?
It might run you out of there.
There's nothing wrong with a little friendly competition.
This is your 10-minute warning.
All right. This is our last item, isn't it?
This is your last item.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to give a quick overview of our website and where we are. So as you all probably know, we launched a new website a little over a year ago. So we've been able to take a look at the visitor traffic that we have. 94% of our visitors to the website were new, which is a really encouraging statistic for us. So if you look on the next slide, what we're seeing is that 24%, about a quarter of our total visitors are accessing on a mobile device. That's a huge shift from our previous website. Our old website had about 90% accessing from a laptop or a desktop. So what we're seeing is that we really are making this shift more toward mobile users, and it, as the slide says, it underscores our growing need to ensure that all of our content is mobile friendly. And this was just we thought it might be of interest. The days of the week, web traffic when our website is most popular. So you'll see like the midweek seems to be the peak time for people to visit. So we plan content updates and refreshing of content around that. We had an increase in web traffic. In September, you'll see some of the growth among some of the pages that are on there, particularly around Dr. Martin's bio. There was a big spike. It was timed right around his speaking engagements, which is really fantastic because what that shows us is that there's a direct correlation between someone using our website as a resource after they've attended one of our events. You can see the referral websites. Google, of course, is the biggest one. Or what I really like about this is that the direct means that someone just went straight into their Internet Explorer, what have you, and typed in our address right off the bat, which is really fantastic because that shows that there's a high level of brand awareness in the community. These are some of the printed materials that we've been working on. That's one of the other areas that our department offers support to the rest of the organization. So you'll see a lot of the care coordination and CFAC brochures. We also have, that's one of our newest ones around TCLI. And then of course we also offer assistance around the infographics and other graphic design needs for the departments. Presentations, manuals, talking points, posters, postcards. That's just sort of the laundry list of some of the things that we do.
They are very busy. They are very, very busy.
Yeah. So, and just for general awareness, those are the three departments that we work with most frequently: Vaya Total Care, Provider Network, and Human Resources. So we've really offered a great deal of support around Vaya Total Care with all of the communications and marketing materials around that. And the Mind Care kiosks, as I had mentioned before, we've worked on a lot of the marketing and promotional materials for that. We developed a really a pretty fun how-to guide for our staff. You'll see the warm transfer. What we were recognizing is that calls weren't being transferred warmly, so we came up with this. This can sit right next to someone's phone, and they can kind of walk themselves through how to make a warm transfer. Also, how to because we've had the shift from salary to hourly employees, we also made one around timesheet entry just to give everybody a refresher on that.
These have been very popular. Staff have found this very helpful.
Good. Yeah, and we plan to roll more of them out as we go along. Events, as you had mentioned earlier, the governor's visit a couple months ago, that was one of the big events that we offered support for. And that was in combination with our Narcan initiative that we've been rolling out.
You mentioned connections.
Yes. Yeah, so as I said, the top connections articles are the 20 questions. We've also offered some direction on what types of submissions we will accept for the connections newsletter, so that's a popular topic as well. Just some of the future directions that we're going to go, that we're looking at. We're hoping to enhance a newsroom feature on our website, and really start taking a look at more multimedia analysis, continuing to enhance and improve our internal communications, and just continuing to offer the cross-departmental support. Did I come in under the wire?
You did. You did great.
So we thought you might find that helpful.
It is, it's great, it went through pretty quick, that was nice to have
And
it
of
in a
course,
good simple way.
they are the marketing team, so their PowerPoint was better than everybody else's. That is to be expected. But the only other thing I would mention is that our annual compliance week will be held starting the second Monday in November. It is at the Press Center the first 2 days, which is for supervisors. And Wednesday and Thursday is split between Haywood County and actually Hickory, which is a nice spot for a lot of our staff. And we'll be doing all of our annual training for staff that is required by DHHS, as well as some HR training.
Good. Well, anybody have any more questions? Thank y'all so much.
One thing that I did fail to, and I may be stealing some thunder on this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So we did find out earlier this week that that the NC Council has awarded us with the Programs of Excellence Award for public awareness and advocacy around the opioid awareness and opioid overdose prevention
But you don't
initiatives
have
that
that
we,
yet?
um,
No, we've
We-
been notified, we got the award.
yeah, we've been notified that we won, so we'll be, yeah,
So
we'll be
who's gonna bring
accepting
this up at
that.
the board meeting, you or me or?
We'll ask Brian.
Yes, yeah, so that was just this week, so we'll be, yeah, we'll be accepting that
It
award
will be,
first. in
Well, thank you all for all the work you do, and keep smiling. Thank you.
you.
I guess I need to move to adjourn,
I did.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Jeannie moved. Pam seconded.
Makes us old.
Mike Doris is here.
Darcy's here, so we can get
Sorry, I'm
And
late.
Billy's run
Stop
outside.
talking about something
Yes,
else.
you got a bunch of proxies.
Well,
I had
you
three.
keep talking, others will anyway.
Run up down the road. It's got some run down, Denver, Columbus.
Dr. Khan gave his proxy to, Dr. Khan gave his proxy.
Hello, Mike.
Bill Kennedy.
What was that first name?
Roll call.
There should be a form for it.
Thought you'd break the camera facing me for 2 meetings, huh?
Just made it.
So Ryan, we connected to the same meetings and we're still connected with the Brian's host code, so it should be good. Perfect. Yeah, anybody that calls in, it'll be here too. You just control the audience.
All right, welcome everyone. We want to get our meeting started tonight. At this time, I'll do the roll call. Nancy Baker.
Here.
Ronnie Beal.
Here.
Gary Blevins. Here. Richard Bonio. Here. Here, okay. He's here, okay. Dr. Khan has given his proxy to,
Me, I believe.
yeah, he has, to Bill Kennedy. Ira Dove.
Here.
Jenny Duncan. Joyce Edwards is not here, but she's given her proxy to me. Dr. Jeff Heck, he's given his proxy to me. Pam Holcomb.
Here.
Jim Holland.
Here.
Jenny Johansson. Billy Kennedy.
Present.
Mike Lavender.
Present.
Pat McGinnis.
Here.
Mike Norris.
Pretty sure I'm here.
All right. We're pretty sure you are too, okay? Marsh Pittman. And Steve. Okay, Marshall's on the phone. And Steve Smith. Okay, we do have 4. Okay. All right. Oh, boy. Okay, signed up for public comment, we have Jerry Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Glad y'all got to see me again. Happy Halloween. I had a daughter born on Halloween. She's been my spook for years, you know? I have some concerns that I'd like to pass on to the board. I'd like for each of you board members to listen and pay attention, because you haven't in the past on this subject. And if someone don't act, I'm going to act. So we looked at a valuable thing today called marketing for Vaya. And they did a great job on the presentation talking about the media outlets and how they can get the message out. Well, I never heard them say a thing about YouTube or me. And it's not about me, it's about my YouTube. I got 530 hits on the one before. I got 360 on this past one. So if you're about marketing, why don't you use the resources you have here? Mine's free. You don't have to buy mine. And if it reaches that kind of numbers, we can even improve if you'll help me a little bit. So anyway, I think getting a message out's a good thing. The other piece that goes with this marketing is if you're going to send these news media outlets out, think about me. I'm an individual. But one individual can do a lot. So I've been asking for over a year to get public information reinstated to me, to get the agenda and the agenda items like you board members get each month. These things are valuable to me because I'm a person that looks and interested, and probably the only one in the community really, that comes to your meeting. The news media don't care about you or they'd be here. The other thing is the news media should be able to get this stuff electronically just like each board member do. How would you like to come to a meeting and not have your material? Or how would you like to come and not be prepared for the meeting? That's the way I am when I walk through the door, unless somebody tells me something. So, you've got a great lawyer and you pay big bucks for both of them. You've got a great CEO and pay big bucks. And you board members might not make much at all. But information is powerful. So I'd like for you board members to insist on the CEO and the attorneys to provide me with this electronic data that I am entitled to. And if you're going to provide it to the media, why not provide it to me? And if you don't provide it to the media, I think something's wrong with that picture anyway. So I'm going to follow up on this. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, at this time, we review and approval of the agenda and prior meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda and the minutes from the last meeting?
I wasn't here, I can't move the minutes.
You can.
So,
Okay, we have a motion. Nancy made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Michael and Billy both seconded. Thank you, George. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Conflict of interest disclosure. Tracy Hayes, our general counsel and CCO.
this is the section of our board meeting where if any of you have any new conflicts of interest to disclose, I would ask that you do so. No one has disclosed anything to me since the last board meeting. Hearing none, I think we can move on.
Thank you. Next few items, if you have not had your board member ID badges made, where's the gentleman that makes the doing that?
He just took my picture, he's probably processing.
He's right outside.
Okay.
And this, to be clear, y'all have had badges with your names, but these will actually have your photo and will give you access to the building so that you don't have to wait out in the lobby. As board members, you absolutely have that right, so we wanted to make it easier for you.
Do we still need to sign in because this logs us in, right?
You do not need to sign in because you are a board member. But I will say one thing, because these badges come with access to our buildings, we would want you to take good care of them. And if for any reason you lose it, you need to report that to us as soon as possible so that we can make sure that access is turned on.
So we need to get our patch.
Yes.
If you would like to.
Will
You
that
do
be-
not have to, it is up to you.
Will we be able to do that at the conclusion of this?
We can make that happen.
Sure,
Okay.
sure, don't like that. Okay, another item to mention is the employees' appreciation luncheon is December the 1st at the Crown Plaza in Asheville. If you can attend, would you let Ryan know? I'd like to have as many board members there as we possibly can.
If you haven't, I went last year, I believe, and if you haven't been, it's
It
a
was
great
fun.
thing. It's amazing to see the whole team. It was very fun. I'll try to make it. I'll let you know.
Also,
does it start?
Yeah, I would say lunch will be served around noon. And then we do awards in the afternoon. We have close to 100 people that'll get an award. And then there's usually a presentation in the afternoon, just of highlights of what's been happening in the organization. People will start gathering around 11:30, Ronnie.
Remind me, is Crown Plaza the one where you turn next to Jackson's?
Yes.
We can send you all the details.
Also, December 6th through the 8th, the North Carolina Council Conference is in Pinehurst. This is an annual event. Several board members have signed up. If you haven't, please let Ryan know, and she'll get you signed up. I believe you have to make your own hotel, motel accommodations, which you'll get reimbursed for. So if you haven't signed up for the council meeting, it's very good. And also, tonight we have the 2018 meeting schedule. Have you had, everybody had a chance to look at it? And also it has the retreat information, a list of dates for the retreat. The retreat is scheduled for January 26th and 27th at the Doubletree, Biltmore. More information is coming on that. We follow the same schedule with the executive committee meeting at 1:30, quality, regulatory compliance and quality committee at 3, finance committee at 3, and board, our meeting at 4:30. We do not have a board meeting planned in July or December of next year. Has everybody had a chance to look at those dates? If so, could we have a motion for that to be approved?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Okay.
All in favor of approving the meeting schedule, including the retreat schedule, say aye.
Aye.
There is one thing I forgot to mention about the council meeting. This year, we're going to have a booth, and we would like for board members that are there to help us work the booth, so to speak, and talk to people that are at the conference. Be a great experience for you. So just want to mention that. If you plan on attending, let us know. Okay, at this time, we'd like to call on Clark Phillip, our new CFO. And Clark, since maybe everybody hasn't met you, will you sort of reintroduce yourself? Spend a couple minutes reintroducing yourself.
I would certainly love to. I've spent since 1986 in the managed care arena, and in probably since 2001 in the Medicaid managed care arena with a subsidiary of AmeriHealth Mercy, now AmeriHealth Caritas, for the first 6-7 years. And then I went to Rhode Island to work for Neighborhood Health Plan of Rhode Island, which is the only health plan in the country, Medicaid health plan in the country, that was rated in the top 10 since the inception of the ratings. So, and most recently I was with Molina Healthcare in Charleston, South Carolina, as the VP of Finance for their South Carolina operations, and then had the opportunity to come here to Asheville, lovely Asheville, to work with Vaya, and I'm excited about this opportunity. My wife and I are in the process of relocating now. The movers and packers are there this week. So life isn't much fun right now, but it will be over soon. So looking forward to working with all of you, and be happy to answer any questions about myself, my background, or anything else if you'd like to ask those, or now, or at the conclusion of the meeting.
Welcome to the mountains.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to it. It's very beautiful up here. So having given a little background on myself, I'll move into the finance report. A couple of items that we obviously looked at financial reports. The current ratio went up for both the Medicaid and the enterprise this month. It's been going up for the last couple of months. So the current ratio is 3 times what the minimum requirement is. The defensive interval went down a little bit because we saw a reduction in capitation, but that reduction in capitation, we have to know, move back the other direction in September, so we should see the defensive ratio move back up in the month of September. Looking at the consolidated financial statements year-to-date through the end of August, our total operating surplus year-to-date is about $234,000. That's comprised of a surplus on the service side of about $1.1 million and a deficit on the administrative side of about $900,000. We actually have a positive surplus in. We had a positive surplus on the Medicaid side, and a negative surplus, a very small positive on the non-Medicaid side. We reviewed some of the graphical representations of revenue. We looked at the Medicaid service lines. Overall, we're very close to budget. I think we're within about 2.9% of budget. And we reviewed the Medicaid services, noting that the ICF and innovations comprise more than 50% of our service category expenses. And we also, and that was the review of the financial statements. The committee approved the financial statements as they were presented. And we moved on to a budget revision of about $15 million, a positive budget revision. That $15 million is comprised primarily of $10 million related to the ADAC funding for fiscal year 18, and also the naloxone kits worth about $3 million, which make up the majority of that $15 million. The committee approved the budget revision, and we, from that point, moved on to the draft audit report to be presented by Jeremy Hicks and Rachel Webster. So, if you want to, if you want to move into the audit report.
Well, before we do, we need to board action on the financial dashboard and on the budget amendments. Is there a motion on the financial dashboard?
Well, I've got a question first, and maybe for Brian. So this defensive interval, I'm all for it. My hospital has a 180-day cushion. But I'm wondering, since the state is so quick to take away any extra money that we may be saving, I'm wondering if this is making us liable to lose more money to the state clawback legislators in Raleigh.
The short answer is, I don't know. I mean, we don't know. And, we did sort of joke about that, although it's no joke, in the Finance Committee in our budget, and how we're going to have to move really to a shorter interval of planning for our budget, because there are factors that we can't control that can have an enormous impact on us. Now, that being said, there was a solvency report done by, I guess it was Fiscal Research, which is kind of the research arm of the General Assembly that drafted in methodology, I guess we would call it, for how much money we ought to have. To really try to square this up in terms of all the things that I would say are baked in. They're in the lockbox. We can't touch them. It's a lot of money. We're a big company. We're a $400 million company. So, yeah, there's a lot of requirements because of the nature of the business we're in and the contractual and government aspect of us. And there's, a smaller and smaller amount, and you'll hear that when these folks talk today, that is a sort of our spendable cash. And that was the term that was used in the solvency report. It's very complicated for people to understand because it's both accounting, and it's not pure accounting terms. There are other terms that are sort of government terms, so it's such a mishmash. And in fact, in this report, they tried to dumb it down to the point where it said spendable and non-spendable. Okay? So your question of how much should we be able to have, people are trying to advance a position on that. Now, I don't know what is going to happen with this, but we did not have, I'll try to go back. So they said, there's this calculation that you're allowed to have, and anything more than that has to be proposed as essentially a reinvestment plan that would have to be approved by DHHS. We were not up to that limit of how much we could save. I'll put it that way. We were short like $15 million or something. There we go, 14 or 15 million. So we're south of the maximum allowable keep a hold of it amount in this draft report done by Fiscal Research. So that's a way of answering the question, if you followed all of that.
I get it.
And if I had to do that all over again, I could probably do it better, but hopefully you
I
followed
think
it.
I got it. So I move we accept the financial report.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I have a
Okay.
question. And it's, I'm sure it's completely my ignorance, so I just say that to begin with. So if I'm looking at the consolidated income statement and the actual versus budget, can you help me to understand on the administrative expenses how the math is that determines the net surplus loss on administration?
On administration, yes. So let's look at on the Medicaid side of the schedule, which is the far left-hand column, the first column under the Medicaid heading under actual. So if you take the revenue up above that relates to administration, the $6,150,000, and you add to that the $12,413, and then from that you subtract the $5,795,144. That should leave you with the $218,768.
Okay, so it's anything that's not service is considered admin revenue. Is that how that works?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the financial dashboard. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, is there all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we also have a budget amendment, budget revision number 4.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. It's not unanimous. Okay, do we have one no vote? Okay, it's unanimous then. Okay. All right. At this time, we have a draft review of the 2016-2017 audit from Clifton, Larson, Allen. I'd like to call on Jeremy Hicks at this time.
Thank you. Yeah. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. As Clark mentioned, we did go through the packet that you have in front of you in some detail with the Finance Committee earlier today. I'm Jeremy Hicks, the principal on the audit engagement. I have with me Rachel Webster, who is the director on the audit engagement. Again, happy to be here today, and we're kind of going to go through just a high level of what we discussed with the Finance Committee as far as the 2017 audit results. Within your packet, we're going to just focus behind tabs A and B. So I'll start behind tab A, which is our required auditor communications. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on the fair presentation of the financial statements in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles. We plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance that the financials are free of material misstatement. As part of the audit procedures that we perform, we do take a look at the internal controls for the organization. We use that along with the risk assessment that we perform during the planning stages of the audit engagement to really kind of set up the testing that we perform during our audit field work. We do utilize a risk-based approach, so we focus on areas of higher risk for the organization during our audit procedures. Plan, scope, and timing of the audit proceeded as planned. Moving down the page, significant accounting policies. Management is responsible for those policies, and those are outlined in Note 1 to your financial statement draft. Based on the procedures that we perform, the accounting policies in place by the organization do appear appropriate. No new accounting policies adopted in the current year, so the disclosures within the financial statements are very consistent with what you saw in the prior year. And really no significant or unusual transactions occurred. As far as significant accounting estimates go, one of the more significant estimates that we take a look at during our audit procedures is the liability for incurred but not reported claims. We spent quite a bit of time testing this and the model used, and also performing a retrospective review of the liability recorded there. Based on our procedures around that, no issues noted with the recording of that liability in 2017. Basically, based on the procedures that we perform, the estimates used and recorded by management appear reasonable. Flipping over to the next page, I did have a few audit adjustments that we made during the process. Most of those related to just conversion from modified accrual to full accrual statements. Rachel will touch on a little bit about how the financial statements are set up, which again are very consistent with what you've seen in the prior years. No disagreements with management, no significant difficulties in encountering and performing the audit. Certainly want to thank Amanda and the accounting team here. The audit, as far as the audit went, very smooth process from our end. We do ask for quite a bit of information ahead of time to really set us up so that when we come on site that we're able to hit the ground running. And all that information was provided, any questions were answered, so certainly want to thank the team here for their help during the process. Management will provide us with a signed representation letter upon acceptance of the financial statement draft, and no other issues or significant findings to discuss.
Okay, so I'll go behind tab B here, and if you have any questions as I'm going through, feel free to just speak up. So the reporting format, as Jeremy mentioned, you guys keep your trial balance on the modified accrual basis, which if you look at the bottom half of the statements is where you're going to see that. So the audit adjustments he referenced were the adjustments to get to the full accrual statements, which is really the top half of statements. Under the governmental standards that you guys are in and the DMA reporting requirements, you're required to show both types of accounting in there, and so there's a certain number of standard adjustments that are made. The audit report on the financial statements was released with an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that can be achieved. Looking at the unrestricted cash balance, I've already talked about this a little bit. Certainly with that reduction of single stream funding, you'll see a decrease in the unrestricted cash balance as it relates to days on hand, down from 90 days last year to 63. You guys did experience a decrease in your unrestricted net position. You're in an operating loss position this year as opposed to the prior year. And so these are things that I know you guys have discussed throughout the year, but you really start to see kind of that impact of the reduction there. Although you guys did have the significant loss, it's important to note that you guys were aware of that coming in and you did budget, and so actually budgeted for a much more significant loss than you actually had results, which is, I think, a positive thing related to, I know, the expense management and all the expenses utilization things that you guys discuss in these meetings. Vaya did administer approximately $64 million of federal and state financial assistance during fiscal year 17. It's only a slight decrease from the prior year because although you guys did have a reduction in state funding, there was also additional allocation letters and amounts received that you guys were able to kind of cover some of that gap. We do a significant amount of testing as it relates to compliance with the federal and state awards and how the money is spent. I'm happy to report there were no instances of non-compliance that we noted in any of the programs, no findings noted in any of our testing. So we really kind of take a deep dive there and didn't find anything to note. And again, always appreciation to Amanda and the team out in the Silva location, and then next year we'll be out here in the Asheville location with them. So as you look at the financial statements, the biggest change you're going to see is right there on the first page is Vaya Health. Last year you were issued still under the Smoky name. Other than that, as Jeremy said, the disclosures are very consistent. There's nothing that's been added or taken away this year. It's just an update in the numbers. Do you guys have any questions about, we can go into any of the variances, or if you have questions about any particular line items or anything like that, we can answer that if you have them.
One other thing to note too, in addition to the financial statement audit and compliance audit that we just discussed, there was also an additional attestation engagement that was performed in the current year. You guys were lucky enough to be selected by the state to have some testing done related to your participants within the state pension plan. So every year they select a couple of organizations that have employees that are part of that plan. So we did some testing as required by the state on some of the sensitive information that was provided by Vaya to the state related to those participants. No issues there, and a clean letter was issued around that testing as well.
That's why I'm proud to be on this board. Good job, guys.
Any other questions or comments? The Finance Committee also reviewed and approved this, the audit. I would like to say, we'd like to really thank the staff, the team that worked hard on this, Amanda, Jennifer Turnay, everyone, all your efforts on this. It's obvious when you look at the report, there's a lot of work went into this, so thank you. If no one has any questions, we need a motion to approve the 2016-17 audit.
I have a motion.
Okay, wait a minute, Pat's got a question.
I said I make a motion.
Oh, make a motion, okay, Pat made motion, is there a second? Mike, second?
Just for clarification, we're approving the audit pending the final report, right?
Draft, yes.
Good, because that's what my exact question was. Should we approve the final draft and not the final and not the draft?
So,
I think we approved the draft, is what we did. Is that, sorry?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't finalize the report without your approval, and then that's when it gets submitted to the state.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any more questions?
When were you, this audit was as of, what month was the audit ending?
June 30, 2017.
June 30, so the new year starts just on July 1.
That's right.
Do you come back during the year?
We go back, typically the way our timing works is we'll come in the kind of May timeframe and do kind of our planning, interim procedures. And then our final field work is typically late August timeframe.
It's just changing so quick. We don't never know.
We like to give Amanda a couple months off, and then we'll
We
start
don't know
back
when
up
to keep
with
the
her.
lights on for 6 months, like that, right, man?
I don't know how to answer that.
But audits have become so important, as you all know, really. And it is great, thank you.
Any other comments or questions about the audit? Hearing none, everyone in favor of the report, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you, everyone. At this time, the report of our Chief Executive Officer, Brian Ingram, Chief Executive Officer, Legislative and DHHS updates.
Really want to encourage you to come down and be part of our booth. Pioneers, we've never done that before, and we're not having a particular focus other than to just talk about ourselves and some of our features, I guess some of the things we're more proud of programmatically, and it'll be pretty simple to go down there and be part of it, and having you guys be part of that as well, I think would be a real neat thing. So we really want to encourage people to do that. There's a real big relationship between a couple of things here that, again, have put things into kind of a spin. There were 2 committee meetings a couple of weeks ago that had a lot to do with Cardinal. They start off about other things and end up being about Cardinal. That's kind of how this goes. It was, about the 1115 waiver, and then there was an agenda item about the Cardinal. There was an additional audit that was done. I'm just kind of assuming everybody has read this in the media. The findings of that were really pretty significant around generous severance agreements for the CEO and 10 executives. And, as I said earlier, it was kind of like putting jet fuel on a fire because people were, we listened to the streaming audio, just very, very, very angry about this. And this has been building for months. So, and it culminated with, some very, the sternest possible, I think, language from members of the General Assembly, even asking DHHS about their ability to terminate their contract and split up the counties and just, get this taken care of. So, on the heels of that, Cardinal had a called board meeting, and as an outgrowth of that meeting, the board, in a split decision with a majority, decided to lower the CEO's salary. And the CEO responded that he would not find that acceptable. So subsequently, Mr. Topping will be leaving. What we understand is that that'll occur probably sometime within the next month in November. And that's significant in and of itself because Cardinal has been, ended up being very isolated in terms of relationship and being a player in terms of a lot of the managed care planning. So with that change, we'll have to see what happens with all of that. The other part of it is that so much of the emphasis started off as, we'll just call it House Bill 403, was around salary and board activity and authority on the secretary's part to be able to just go in and disassemble a board, appoint a caretaker board, limit salary, fire a CEO. Now mind you, this bill is full of a lot of stuff, but what was getting all the attention was all of this legislative activity directed at Cardinal and honestly directed at the CEO. And a lot of the discussion was around differentiating that because these poor folks that work there are really probably not having a very good time, let's just say. So there are things in 403 that would have a bearing on us and how we operate. There's things in there about the board, the appointment process, how we can use our money and what we can use it for. It's got stuff all over the place. But again, everybody was paying attention to the salary stuff. Tracy has done a lot of work on this to kind of analyze that and see how it could be improved upon. What happens with 403 now becomes really a good question. You may recall that at the end of the last session, DHHS was very, very intent on getting additional language put in around aged care. And the major feature there being a change in the law that would take a fair amount of the population for which we receive a capitation now and move them into the bid for physical health management. Okay? And it's a little difficult to follow this, but all of these things are related. You have the change in relationship to Richard, the emphasis that puts or maybe lessons around House Bill 403, and these major features in 403 that people were using because there was so much interest in passing legislation because everybody wanted to get at Cardinal, right? I mean, you understand how the politics of this work. So that's why you started seeing these things get lobbed in there that other people wanted to get done, which are very significant in and of themselves, but because they didn't exist in another piece of legislation, there has to be a vehicle to get the things done. So that's what was going on, and that's why this becomes so complex. So, let me tell you about the language that DHHS is pursuing in relationship to managed care and the effect that would have on us. Okay, if you can follow all of this. And I apologize. If there's a way to make this simpler, I would, right?
But we were in Kitty Hawk, and we get asked about this bill. And do you know, or they're really having trouble finding who wrote the bill?
Well, it started off with pretty much in the House.
But who wrote it? Somebody had to put a pen. There's nobody that intelligent enough to write this bill.
I'd rather not say. I'd rather not say.
Do you know who wrote it?
Yeah.
Okay, so that, who wrote it has a lot to do with how it's written. If you try to sit down and read this bill,
Yes.
I mean, you could read it, if you're a common person to sit down and read it,
No.
you know, Chinese for it. I mean, you cannot do that.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just, it's the most confusing thing, it's almost as bad as 56, not hardly, but almost. They've combined so many things, good things and bad things, the typical.
Or
bill.
hard to even know if they're good or bad.
Yeah, I mean, you don't, if you try to read it, and when this staff at the association gets confused, you've done a day's work. And so they were digging to try to find out how it was written, and how it kept, even up until the day, you know, it was being changed. It was, you know, updated if it didn't, not by the legislature, by the author of the bill. And
It's been, well, I don't want to get off track here, but it's been, efforts have been made to modify it again. Okay,
Right.
just within the last week or so. And it's with the leadership of the Senate and the House. The Speaker and the President Pro Tem are involved with, I'll say, negotiations with the HHS on it last week. So it's right there at the brink again, okay? And we can talk some more about it, but
Okay.
anyway.
We're just curious.
You're absolutely right, you're absolutely right, and one of the things that, you know, when you have something like that, the opportunity for, we'll just start with the confusion and unintended consequences, because people think they're writing something that means this, but it's interpreted and then it means that and this, you know, it's so less than ideal. But one of the big parts now with DHHS that's so important to us has to do with whether or not the mild to moderate users, as they're being referred to, would be moved out of our capitation, okay? And we would no longer be responsible for managing their care. So, see if you can follow all of this. What the Secretary has advanced is a plan sometime into the future, and the timeline varies depending upon the iteration of language you're looking at, to create tailored plans, which are like these special needs plans that we've talked about before, which would be responsible for the totality of management of an individual's needs in the Medicaid program, okay? So there'd be 100,000 folks statewide that are the heaviest users of the system of behavioral health, substance use, and IDD. So you take the 100,000, you know, most complicated people statewide, and you'd assign the responsibility also to manage their physical health, okay? So you're talking about a very high-risk pool of individuals. What they're planning on doing is keeping them separate, bidding that out as part of the tailored plans later on, but then everybody else, their care is managed by the physical health plans, okay? And they want to have the procurement for that in the spring of next year. And, you know, we've got another version of the runway, and again, I'm going to just defer you to that to understand all the features that have to occur in order for that to actually happen. But that's why this language is so important, is to be able to be the launch for doing that. Now, what would result then is that many of the people who are part of our capitation, so we, for example, our capitation is based on 170,000 people now, right? 170,000 Medicaid people, and the penetration rate is probably around 10%. So let's say there's 17,000 people that actually use a service. So you'd be saying that, you know, maybe as many as 150,000 people, you know, would be part of a plan and have all of their care managed there, even though it's somewhat incidental, probably more than that. So what you end up with is a massive change in our capitation, okay? On the service side, you know, it could be, you know, we would deal with it just because we wouldn't be authorizing or paying for services for other folks. On the admin side, it wouldn't change our administrative costs a whit. Those are all fixed costs, essentially. And
So we wouldn't get the money.
Huh?
We wouldn't get paid.
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it, Ron?
Yeah.
What about the money? So they'd have to make enormous changes in the way our capitation was done. And once that population was gone, now they're promising, you know, that they're gonna do these tailored plans. You know, we don't understand very much about that, but once that population leaves our capitation and goes into physical health, you've already defined the future. Regardless of whether tailored plans are the best thing or the worst thing or a okay thing, you've already made a major change in our world, and somewhat for providers as well. And that's why this is such a big deal now. So you've got that's in there, you've got the salary stuff, and a lot of the air's been taken out of that, but, man, you know, I'm trying to make this simple, and it's not. So Richard goes, but you still have 10 executives that make, you know, let's say $300,000, $400,000. There's no state requirements around that salary. Well, nobody's going to be very happy with that either, are they? And then how are they going to rehire someone to go in there and work? So all this salary stuff, it's just the first chapter. We haven't even written the first chapter yet. There's going to be a lot more that has to happen with all of that. All of this stuff is tied up in that one piece of legislation. And to boot, you have the issue of the severance for the executives, and with Richard leaving, believe it or not, there's a clause in the severance agreement of those executives that allows them to leave and tap into their severance, which is as much as 3 years' pay. So, is that a fine kettle of fish?
And they're making what kind of money already?
Well, Richard made 660
Right.
something.
But I'm talking about the other 10.
I don't know. You can just assume, okay, you know, it's kind of a multiple of 3 probably for what we make, but, so I don't know, but.
Does this affect the Medicaid waiver? Are they gonna have to get this through?
No, well, see, this mild to moderate change is a real big deal for DHHS. They're doing a full court press to try to get that in the legislation and to get people to support that, along with the authority to deal with Cardinal. You know, part of the language that they wanted in there was to give the secretary this enormous authority, carte blanche, to be able to just fire a CEO and replace a board. I mean, that's how, and again, it's why I started with the LOC meeting. People were so mad that they, you know, if it came down to that, they'd have a real shot at it, because they just wanted to burn the place down.
But, I mean, I know we don't need to regurgitate Cardinal stuff, but why didn't it get caught at some of the audits? Or is this really just a board policy failing?
Oh boy, I wish there was I guess the simple answer is the Office of State Human Resources was getting copies of their salaries every year and nobody protested it, to be honest. They weren't doing anything wrong from that
I know, we've looked at that, they're following the law as it was written, and then.
So, let me just try to go back and make sure you got, so you see the enormous factor that there is with Cardinal, okay? And it's not about the judgment of it, but just the factor of it politically. How that plays itself out in 403, that also has these other huge pieces in it that will affect all of us. And how are all of these events going to influence one another? Has the air been taken out of things enough with Richard, you know, theoretically leaving? you know, and I can't say that he is, I mean, we don't know that, but presume that. You know, will that kind of take the air out of 403 and settle things down? Will they still get upset about everybody else's salaries? How does that factor into all these other big managed care pieces of legislation that are stuffed in there? It's a whole big whirlwind.
Brian, for a long time, I mean, you've been looking ahead and you were thinking about these special needs plans or tailored plans. Is that census that's now being identified, that top 100,000, is that the size that you anticipated that would be available to?
I wish I could give you a good answer. The problem is we have requested twice data to be able to interpret what the population would look like for us. So for example, what would their real cost be for us? I mean, if somebody could tell us, you know, here's the characteristics of the people, you know, we could then go in and mine the Medicaid claims data and say, okay, here's how much of the behavioral health spend there is, here's how much of the medical spend there is. I mean, we have no real idea. And see how that, you know, can you make a financial model out of that? So short of having any data to draw upon for that, it's like, I don't know. You know, you can scale, you know, and again, now remember the denominator here is that they were only going to have 3 of these statewide. So you'd have a plan with 35,000 people in them, 30,000 people, that has enormous risk. It's not like what we have now, right? So we get paid for all these people, and again, that's acceptable. It's just how the insurance business works, right? I mean, you don't just, you know, you get premium payments for a lot of people that don't need insurance. I mean, that's, you know, and that's the risk pool, right? You know, it balances out. This other model is, by its nature, an extremely high-risk pool of individuals. So even at this early stage of doing this mild to moderate stuff, you know, they're creating the future by default. Now, do I believe that tailored plans conceptually are a good idea? Yeah, I do. It's exactly what we wanted. It's exactly what we're preparing for, conceptually. I mean, how do you get from where we are now to there? I mean, it's just a void. And in those meetings, there was a lot of displeasure with the HHS about the weakness of their plan around this void. You know, and on the one hand, you want us to, you know, it's kind of, we use the Tarzan law, right? You don't let go of the old vine till you got the new one in your hand. Well, that's what they want us to do. Right? Go ahead, we'll figure this out later. Let us move this population over, but we don't really know what this new plan, if you will, and what the implementation of it would be like. We don't even know what the regions would be. Would we be able to successfully bid on a region? You don't win a region, you're out of luck. I mean, there is no more LME MCO, essentially. So you see how it just starts to roll downhill.
Yeah, and I would tell you the healthcare side of the discussion with them isn't going much better. There's a lot of mystery about the specifics.
You know, and again, I'm going to say this without judgment because God knows who could be watching. You know, there's just very legitimate concerns about DHHS's ability to administer a managed care program of this magnitude. And it's just a fair statement. You see the complexities here.
In this group of people that you're talking about, they're just gonna, they can move them over to this. So are you, say like if Jerry was in this group, then would I be notified, okay, Jerry's gonna be moved over into this group and somebody else is gonna,
Let's use Jerry as an example, can we?
yes,
Because it's a real concrete thing, and I
yes,
know
it is.
talking about big numbers statewide. So Jerry, because of the nature of his conditions, would be in that specialty plan. Okay? Innovations waiver people, they're in the specialty plan. Now, so in the meantime, so let's say they go out and do this procurement and move all the other people over there, and all of their health care is covered there. Jerry's health care would still be fee for service. The health care part of his Medicaid benefit would not get moved over into the plans, into the managed care plan, okay? If they did, he'd have to choose twice. He'd have to go over there and have his health care done there for, let's say, 3 or 4 years, and then have it moved back over into the specialty plan. So for him, nothing would be different. 0 would be different. Does that make sense? And you see that other caveat around the healthcare portion of the 100,000, their stuff would have to stay in fee for service. I mean, the complexity of the rate setting with this, it's, you know, this is, well, just imagine, Clark. I'm afraid he's gonna run out the door.
Well, when you risk adjust, when you risk adjust a population and try to stratify the high risk versus the low risk, the problem with that is that when the actuaries do this, they typically kind of cut off the peaks and valleys. So if you get a population that's on the real high end of that, you may not have enough revenue to cover it. Whereas the people on the low end of it, the MCOs, they may get a little windfall because they're not getting these high risks.
It's easier. It's less risky generally. It's going to be much more risky when you're dealing only with mountains.
Right.
So you see, all of this is, and the weird thing is how it's all connected because of the way the legislation has just accumulated all of this stuff. And like what Ronnie says, you can't read it and really understand a lot about it.
It's the equivalent of what's thrown around in my world is the high-risk pool. It's the high-risk pool.
Exactly.
Is this 100,000 number selected because it's believed that catches the need, or is it selected as that's going to be the cutoff?
Well, the way
That was not a loaded question.
That was a good one.
See, I think the way I would say that, it might be how you intended, is there's a policy factor and there's a money factor in that, right? I mean, from a policy perspective, this makes sense because, it's like any other population, and other states do this, and the example I use, let's say for people that are HIV positive, I mean, you just have a complicated health condition that's going to need care that is going to be different. It's going to have to be specialized, right? It's the same thing here. So does that number properly capture people with the characteristics that are going to need a very focused, specialized delivery system and care management? Again, because we don't know the real methodology to understand that, I don't know. The other question is financially, how does that work? Because you could have the greatest policy piece, but if there's not a financial model that can make it work on 100,000 people, then, is that how you kind of?
Yes,
Okay.
and you threw out a number when you were relating it to us.
Mm-hmm.
10% of 170, 17,000, is that what you would picture as our contribution to that 100,000? Maybe.
It could be much higher.
Yeah, it wouldn't be much higher. And I'm just, I'm making that up. Really, I'm making that up, but the only logic being.
You could be a legislator.
Thank you, Ronnie. That's a high compliment, I know.
Yeah.
Keep your day job.
Thank you, Brian.
It's hard to be surprised anymore.
Yeah.
It's
It's
just
a
unbelievable.
terribly convoluted world. And I hope I did a decent job at explaining it.
But we do have time to, if folks get involved, there's time to get involved with this thing. But if you have people that can't read it, Brian, it's hard to, there's nobody that can, you just go online and try to read it. Just go to the local county legislature and put in HB 405 and try to read this. Just read it for yourselves. That's all you have to do. And you'll just shut it down. I'll assure you. You'll say, what? You can't read it. I bet Tracy, did you struggle reading it? Tell the truth.
It is written the way a lot of things in the Medicaid world are written, so unfortunately I have become immune to that style of writing, and I could understand it, but it is not, there are a lot of details missing. That's the problem. There are so many details missing.
It skips. It
Yes,
goes.
it's very high level.
Yeah. And if you read between the lines or talk to these folks, Brian's exactly right. There's things in there that could really damage our area, especially in a rural county. Rural counties could really take a wallop here.
When you say details are missing, you're not just talking about those normal things that then the regulatory bodies
There's a lot
fill
of
in.
there's a lot of assumptions that are unstated, and so you have to try and guess at what those assumptions are.
Fill in the blanks later.
Yes. The way we've discussed it is it is sort of a just trust us approach.
You have to prove it to know what's in it.
Are you going, is that a quote?
I'll bring your bottle back and I just want to kiss you.
Okay. Stop that
What can you
comment.
say? What do you say? Mr. Chairman?
You ready to move on?
I think so.
Okay. Okay.
Been ready.
All right.
Watch the, serious, watch the papers. I mean, how, again, you see the relationship between all of these things and what happens with one, there's a lot of dominoes.
Well, I have to ask this. I've heard that some of the counties are requesting to pull out a cardinal, and I've heard that
Sure.
some of them are requesting to come to Vaya. Have you heard that?
No.
What? Okay, well.
No,
I
I haven't
hope
had
then-
any requests or conversations with any county. But I'm sure, now I'm just giving you the facts. Now, if you start to add the rumors and the gossip, I mean, you've got like another 600% of stuff that just, yeah, so.
Well, sounds like to me it's a good time to go into closed session.
Most to go to closed session,
Wait.
Mr. Chairman.
Pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 11A1, in order to prevent the disclosure of competitive health care information that's privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 122C through 126.1 are not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes, or to consult with attorneys pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 11A3. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is there a second? Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Ready to get.
Okay.
All right. Well, we had a good regulatory compliance and quality committee meeting. We reviewed the August reports and the quarterly reports. There's some good news on all of these things because we're doing well. Of the 8 defined state targets, we met 6 in August and only 2 that we didn't meet, and we're working on those. We've got corrective actions that they've been working on, and they've been implemented, and we're hoping to see some results of that in September. I'm going to let Tracy, if what I missed, there were some good things. The audit was good to hear. That shows that our compliance on that is good. The EQR showed improvement in all areas the last 2 quarters, and that's really good. That shows that our staff has been thinking ahead of the issues and trying to get things in order before they get the survey, and so that's good. Several of our employees completed their NCIT training, and that'll help improve our staff. On the NC tops, which we used to be, at 90% standard, now we're at 90.3% standard on that, so we're doing really well on that. Yes, the marketing was under us too, wasn't it? Yes. And the marketing is a new part we're excited about, to get some information out there and to get people to see to be aware of Vaya, and then hopefully expand the resources we've got there and reach more people, because reaching into those, getting those clients that need to be served is part of our goal. The quarterly compliance report was good. Didn't have any problems there. So that's about it. I'd encourage you to read the packet that you got there, and it's got it's about what, 90 pages or something, but they keep refining the graphs and trying to make it easier for us to understand. And then any questions we have along the way, they're really good about coming back the next month and following up on. So, did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Well, the successes and
Successes and achievements.
We
are meeting our TCLI housing standard, so that has been phenomenal news. We talked about that. We talked about the rollout of Vaya Total Care across all 23 counties. It had started as a pilot project in McDowell County. It's being rolled out all 23. And we talked about our new internal newsletter.
Right, and then the super measures that came out, I guess, came under us, and that's financial penalties that if we don't meet certain targets will be implemented 6 months after the fact. So our committee's looking ahead on that too, so they can avoid those. And we're not going to have any of those fines, as Tracy said. So we're going to meet all those goals.
Really positive.
Go team. That's all I've got for that committee. Thank you. I'm really impressed with it's a good committee, and there are a lot of staff working really hard on this, and I appreciate them doing such a good job.
Thank you, Billy. Consumer and Family Advisory Committee report, call on Kathy Dennis.
Thank you. We had local meetings in October, Lenore on the 9th, Silva on the 10th, Asheville on the 16th, and Boone on the 17th. Members received information about the in lieu of service definition for long-term community supports, as well as the upcoming ISP format changes due to the NCADO implementation. We also signed and updated our confidentiality agreements and discussed the Mind-Care kiosk, statewide community engagement and empowerment survey, emergency department staff tip sheet for co-occurring mental health and IDD. Other items on the agenda included committee report outs, an update on the CFAC person-centered plan preparation guide project, and updates on Vaya Health and the state's Medicaid redesign proposal. We have our annual retreat scheduled for this weekend. Christina's coming, I believe, on Saturday. We're looking forward to that, and she will present on Vaya Health system update. We plan on working on some strategic planning, succession planning, team building, and we're going to pack Narcan kits, and we may also do some video about CPAC members. So we're looking forward to it. It's going to be a long weekend, I guess, for some of us, me and Nancy particularly, since it started now and we'll go through Saturday afternoon.
I'm starting Monday, but I'm too tired.
It will go through Saturday evening or afternoon, but we're looking forward to it. Have a lot of people come out, and I hope it warms up a little. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Provider Advisory Council report, Jeannie Duncan.
We met this month as well. We had subcommittee meetings in the morning and worked on some of the broader discussion of the goals that each subcommittee is working on as related to the super measures, and as well as some other things that Vaya has identified for us to work on in their plan for the year. We did have a presentation about the new CMS disaster regulation rules and the implementation of those, and tried to pass out a good bit of material on how to prepare for the surveys, and then as well as just trying to encourage providers to get up with their local emergency management offices and let them know they're there and what they need, what they can provide in emergencies, and in addition to the new CMS stuff. And there's some concerns, of course, about all of that, coming mainly from the emergency management folks, because they're not quite sure how they're going to handle all of the big drills that need to be done to be compliant with that. In the afternoon, we had some presentations from Vaya. Christina came and talked with us about the plan, the Western North Carolina Schools Alliance, the draft plan. We will, as a PAC, take that plan, and we're going to have a larger presentation when it's. We were trying to figure out scheduling based around when the provider summit's going to be scheduled. So it'll either be next month or January. We're not sure which, but probably next month. We'll have a longer, and then we'll take that plan in and as it relates to what the PAC can do to help meet some of the goals within that plan. So we're just continuing to try to. I understand Christina gave my report last month for our annual report for the month. So if anybody has any questions about any of that, I'm glad to answer them.
They just brought up one thing I forgot to mention in the NC TOPS thing. Christina, you'd said that the providers were very influential in getting up to speed and getting that rated by.
Yep, so NC TOPS was an area where for the first several years of waiver operation, we really struggled to meet that requirement by the state. Jeannie's shaking her head. It was very much a challenge. Still is. We implemented a quality improvement project, and so since June 2015, we have not missed the mark. We're at 98.3%, and that's been very much a collaborative effort between our contract performance unit and our providers. I was going to say that, they provide reports that are so helpful in trying to make sure that we're continuing to meet those standards. So it is a joint effort. But those are not the easiest things in the world to get.
Oh, I know, and that getting that 90.8.3, that's an accomplishment. So I wanted to give y'all a
You
shout
add that
out
on
there.
top of the hours you're already doing a comprehensive clinical assessment and a plan, and they don't want to sit there and answer those questions.
If I could, the board doesn't mind, I would like to really just recognize Jeannie Duncan. She noted that in this month's Provider Advisory Council, really it was RHA, and she brought 2 phenomenal staff. As we've all seen in the world in the horrific trauma from hurricanes and floods and everything else that has occurred, how people are really impacted. And for a very, very long time, and Jeannie's been a big part of our provider network ever since we've been here, that we've been really talking a lot to providers. Her agency and the 2 ladies that she brought did a phenomenal presentation. They are more than willing to share anything and everything they've created. It was just extremely professional. It really drove home the light of not only what it takes, which it does take a lot, but what I would say to any of you who are representing the counties, we really stress to our providers that we want them to be involved, you and your emergency management system should absolutely know who these people are, where these consumers are, how they'll be taken care of. You know, absolutely, they talked about what their staff needs were, not only the consumers' needs. And so I just really want to highlight, it was one of the most professional presentations we had at our provider advisory council, and I think kudos to you, and our providers in our network should be very grateful because a tremendous amount of work had went into what you presented, and it was just, and to just share that like that, there is no reason why people would not know how to do this. You know, so great toolbox, so thank you very much. So.
Thank you, Jeannie. Okay, Billy, back to you.
County Commission, we only meet quarterly, so I don't have any news on that report. I'm not even sure when the next meeting is, but should be here, it's usually Tuesday before the Thursday meeting, so, but I'll find out.
Okay. Is there any other business?
Rick, can I just make a comment on the discussion about natural disasters? We had a tornado in Wilkes Monday evening about 5:10. And to your point, I'm vice chairman of the commissioners. When the chairman was out of town, I actually signed a proclamation Tuesday morning, declared a state of emergency in Wilkes County for the entire county. We had a lot of issues Monday night, and we were talking about how people that live, you know, kind of under already strained conditions, how their mental health was affected. And there were a lot of people Monday night, they didn't know where they were going to get food, they didn't know where they were going to get gas. And you know, you get to a near anarchy position very quickly. And I was really struck. I was out all night with some of the law enforcement people and into Tuesday, and we thought we might have to declare a curfew on Tuesday evening. Fortunately, our EMS people, and I wondered what the interplay was between Daymark and our mental health resources, but it's an area that really needs to be explored in depth because we're going to be seeing more of this kind of activity. We've had six tornadoes in Wilkes County in history. Two of them were in the last 3 weeks. So, you know, and we just had this conversation this week among all the officials in the county, and there really is a lot that needs to be discussed here about where we go during natural disasters and, you know, if things break down and how we're going to take care of those that need care the most. So I appreciate your comments and your leadership as well.
That's a good point. I brought it up with our EMS person recently. He said they used to keep a list of people that would be without power. Now, and then they had to stop doing it because it was too much information and it was privacy. So the power companies, I've spoken to our project on aging because, you know, all the people that are on Meals on Wheels, they need to be looked after, and our EMS director. And so they're kind of looking into it to see what options we got, but we don't really have that master list that some places have. Okay, here's people that need help right now. Now, and the bigger we get, the more often these natural disasters happen. You know, people.
Every county's so different in the resources they have too. And we went, you know, we contacted statewide providers, so we had experiences from I'm a part-time. So don't call me. You know, we're not going to help to a full-blown. We've already had some counties go together to do some of these big exercises and drills.
They are getting better on the automated calls. They can do a district. They can draw up our new contract. They can actually say just this neighborhood needs to be alerted, because that was one of the problems in California. I read that they couldn't alert the whole town of Santa Rosa because then they clog all the roads. So if they'd have been able to break it down by neighborhood, they would have been better. But same thing, you know, and then our consumers who are mental health needs, but they're just as vulnerable, more vulnerable than other people. So.
I don't understand the IDD folks and the people in facilities. A lot of times they get left behind when there's a disaster.
And the DSS was the other place I'm looking at those lists coming from. So. But then you get into the HIPAA stuff and how you can share these lists.
Actually, HIPAA is irrelevant at that point.
Okay, sorry, that's just health information.
There are some rules around that give you some exemptions from that if it is an emergency or a disaster like that. But big part of this presentation was related to IDD, because at least in North Carolina, community mental health centers are not under the CMS rules just because of the way that we bill services here. but there are some mental health services that are. But to your point, one of the things we're trying to encourage mental health providers to do is, and it's in our contracts really, is that we make sure every one of those counties know who the mental health providers are, that they can reach out to them to provide some of those services. And oftentimes we're already volunteers to, show up in those disasters, to work in shelters and to work in some of those things, particularly out east where they have all the hurricanes. And we get more activity out there. But
Do those HIPAA exemptions, though, apply equally
it's,
in preparation?
I'm
for
not
the
sure
incident?
about that. I've just read it in the
Because in
CMS rules,
preparation
not
is
the.
when it's needed.
Yeah. Typically, what we're doing though is when we're in preparation, they know our facilities. We may not go through every individual that lives in those facilities, but they know where they are. We already have plans to shelter in place unless something happens, and then we have alternative plans. I mean, we got plans to the plans to the plans, and we provided a lot of these templates for everybody to use if they wanted to use them. So, on that work.
And we have a list that we can provide of all the services people can access that we have on our website and hand out to people who need some
And it's
services.
important to, as Christine said, to make sure you're taking care of your staff as well, because they do. Otherwise, people in the facilities are not taking care of, the staff.
I had shared when we were at the PAC meeting that, as we've all listened and watched these disasters that have occurred around the world, that many of the big hospital systems were saying that now they will be updating their plan every 6 months to evaluate the family's needs of their employees equally as well as their patients. And it just made so much sense. It's like, well, of course you would do that, but we don't. And they were talking, it was just a great NPR story that I listened to, and it made so much sense because, I mean, you need people to work, right? And they have family, and they get put in this horrible bind. And so what they're trying to do is to take care of that bind. We're going to take care of you and whoever in your circle that you have to be with, and you take care of whatever. We're going to go ahead and plan for those people too. And it was very, very humbling to listen to the stories, so.
And it's all that you hope you never need it, but if you don't have it,
Absolutely.
it's good to be tragic.
Thank you.
I move to adjourn.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
You get plenty of those.
Those are always